All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March 26th, the Plata Electric Association Board of Directors meeting. 9 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. First item of business, let's please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next item, approval of agenda. I see we have a note in the board packet about a potential modification to the agenda. Be appreciated if someone would make a motion to make that modification, and then any other modifications that aren't noted, this would be a good time to bring them up.
So moved by Kohler.
Thanks, Kohler. And that's to with the FAC modification on there. Thank you very much. Any move to accept the agenda with the modification? Anyone with the second?
I'll second the modification to approve the agenda, removing item number 2 under the FAC.
Great.
section.
Thank you for the additional clarity. Any more discussion on approval of agenda before we go to vote? Okay, then all in favor of approving the agenda with Kohler's modification? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we have an agenda. Next on the agenda is our safety moment. So I'm going to try and give a little graphic here. I tested this earlier and it's a little hard to read, but I'm going to do it anyway. I want to show off my newest t-shirt.
Nice.
So some of us are seasoned enough to remember who Ready Kilowatt is. And I know you might not have been able to read that, but it used some of the old shock tactics, never mind the pun, that remember, kids, electricity will kill you. So I don't mean to be scary here, but I think it's reasonable as we become more and more accustomed to electricity as just a normal part of our life. We rely on it. It's very reliable. It's easy to forget how powerful it is. In this meeting, I want to just make the comment that all of us as the public and as members should continue to be aware of that electricity can be dangerous, and we take it for granted a lot of the time. So especially those of you out there, you know, with the kiddos crawling around the house, or I know a lot of us like to do the DIY projects around the house, and sometimes we get involved with electricity. So make sure we take all the appropriate precautions. And then I'll point us to next month. We have, I think it's the day after our board meeting, is National Line Workers Day. So we'll obviously celebrate the work that those people do for us, but we'll also take an opportunity to hear from operations about some of the ways that they focus on safety when they're doing their work, because obviously they're much more in the quote unquote line of fire than any of us would be in the general public. So kudos to Kirsten for bringing up that concept, and kudos to staff for being willing to present that safety moment next month. So that gets us through safety moment, gets us into the section of member comments and concerns. I would like for Graham, if you would, give us the preamble to the member comment section.
The board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board will take all member comments under consideration, but will not provide a response during the member comment period. The board asks that each participant's comments pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during the public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. The topic period will be 1 hour in total. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing. Formal complaints must be filed in writing and submitted in compliance with applicable board policy. Comments from the public will be directed to the entire board, not to any individual. No personal attacks shall be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our cooperative policies and procedures on public comment and filing complaints are available on the cooperative website.
Thank you very much, Graham. Okay, so people in the attendees with comments, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on people in the order that hands go up. Janelle and Drew, I can see the hands in the order, so if you don't mind, I'll call them out and you bring them into the room. So it looks like Gail Harris is our first commenter. And Gail, you're in the room and you have the floor.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Gail Harris, and I live in Durango, and I'm a member of LPEA. And first of all, I want to thank LPEA for being an Earth steward at the Earth Day event that's coming up on April 12th. And they're bringing baby goats, so that's going to be a real attractant. So I hope everyone here comes to that Earth Day event and that it's our power, our planet. So it's a great tie-in with LPEA. The second thing, I just want to say I really appreciate all the work that the board does and all the work that the board has done in reaching their decision to leave the tri-state contract and pursuing more clean energy, renewable energy in our energy portfolio. And I'm happy that they're continuing to work or will continue to work once the contract is terminated with tri-state on bringing in some of the energy there. I think it's very important for us to consider basically the health and the well-being of all of our members in looking at having clean energy. And that's it. Thanks so much for all you do.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate you getting online with us and bringing your comments to us today. Next up, Patrick Jonke. Sorry if I mispronounced that. You are in the room and you have the floor.
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, 986 Alpine Forest Drive in Bayfield. And as a residential user of LPEA electricity, I just want to emphasize that my biggest priority, which I think should be the co-op's priority, is a stable and reliable electric grid. And in that regard, I see that the Colorado State Legislature recently voted strongly in favor of adding nuclear power to their list of clean energy sources, and I'm strongly in favor of that. And I also think that the board should be aware of the Moss Landing disaster. If they're not familiar with what happened in Moss Landing, California, you should definitely look that up because it's relevant to the decision for the Four Corners area and southern Colorado in general as to what clean energy would be best to use. And as I said, I just want to emphasize that I think nuclear power should play a significant role in Colorado's future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Next on my list here is Darcy Hitchcock. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Darcy Hitchcock, and I live in Durango. First, I wanted to thank you all so much for doing this hard and complicated and sometimes controversial work to increase our local control over our energy and also to ramp up renewables. I am curious to hear more about what you're doing to remove limitations to areas where people can't connect yet to the grid and how fast you can remove those red zone limitations. Personally, even though I know that utility scale solar is less expensive than rooftop, I would love to see all the big roofs in town and maybe even parking lots covered with solar before we take more land from farms or habitat. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
And thank you very much for attending today, Darcy. Kelly, I see you next. Kelly Haggerty. And you have the floor.
Okay, I think I unmuted.
You're good.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Hegarty and I'm from Durango. I just, again, as everyone else, want to start by saying thank you to the staff at LPEA. Of course, things run very, very smooth. And thank you for all the board members. I know your work it's hard, it's minimally compensated, and you end up probably getting a lot of information from members that you may not want to always hear. But I'm at my desk right now. I can't always make meetings, and this Zoom is very appreciated. So my concerns are actually that it's in regard to the tri-state buyout, and that old information about tri-state is continuing us down this path of a very expensive buyout. And tri-state has and is continuing their renewable portfolio. I know you are probably much more familiar with that than I am, but 50% now with 70% by 2030. They meet state and federal compliancy for emissions and renewable requirements. And that's state mandated, so all the energy providers have to meet with that. And they've successfully navigated their coal transitions. And so their financial stability is back to a strong position. They're allowing more flexibility. They have to provide their members more flexibility because members were wanting to exit. I realized a few years back it wasn't this great, but again, I want to make sure that we're using current information as we go through this buyout process. The CEO of Tri-State has actually said in a meeting that was in Oxford Grange that the money changes hands April 2026. That's when the deal's final. And they're open to negotiation up through that point. And so if they've successfully navigated through so many of the things we wanted with the renewable portfolio, the financial stability, the local control, I'm wondering, why are we continuing this $209 million exit if they're offering what we've been asking for? And I have, if you'll allow me to continue, my concerns about Mercuria, and I realize we've signed an agreement with Mercuria, but again, surely there's a contingency. I mean, we have to come up with $209 million. So I'm sure there's a contingency that is based on us coming up with that money. And I want to make sure that Mercuria is a multinational, multi-billion-dollar for-profit energy market trader. They trade in renewables, but they also trade in crude, oil, fossil fuels, et cetera. So, and the concept that we would have more local voice with a multinational group, I'm just trying to figure that out. I'm just trying to figure where and what is Mercuria's experience with rural electric co-ops? What's our guaranteed deal? And, you know, is it in writing with caps to avoid market swings, things like that? And how's that really supporting going with somebody global for profit? And that's one thing about, at least with, with our rural electric co-ops, we share in those profits. But here we've got this for-profit energy trader. How is that supporting our goals? How much decision-making will LPEA have on that multinational stage? And then even after the buyout, after we pay $209 million, we're still buying power from Tri-State. We're still having to pay for transmission fees. So financing the $209 million buyout, who are the lenders? How are they being selected? Certainly I know members on the board have various companies and associations and whatnot. So I'd certainly as members.
1 minute left.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kelly, one more minute. Thanks.
We want to make sure that if there's any conflicts of interest, that we would understand what those are. What are the loan fees, the rates, the penalties? Really, what's the ultimate cost to the members? And then what's the contingency plan if we don't come up with $209 million? My closing thought, at the end of the day, I hope we're making the right decision using current facts about Tri-State. They've got renewables that meet our goals. They've got flexibility, much more flexibility than they did even just a few years back. Local control, our vote counts, shared profits, financial stability. They are back to a solid investment grade. I just really hope that the board, if you're making a fiscally responsible movement as we navigate into this $209 million path. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome, Kelly, and thank you also for your time and all the good content in there. And thanks for bringing all of that to our attention. We are aware of all of those issues, so I appreciate you sharing it with us and the members. Moving along, Emily, I see you next. Emily Frozen, you have the floor.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Emily Frogen. I'm in District 3, and I've just got a few comments I'd like to make. First, I really appreciated the opportunities recently for public engagement with LPA. I think between the town halls, the conversations with Chris in these board meetings, the board and staff's accessibility and transparency with membership questions, comments, and concerns has really helped me understand the new rate increase and LPA and board decisions better. So thank you all for that. Second, I think that LPA has done a really good job in governance during this transition to a new power supply. Both the new CEO and power supply manager bring experience that is necessary for a smooth and beneficial exit from Tri-State. LPA has definitely, in my mind, made the best decision for its members by leaving Tri-State. The stranded assets and bad business decisions that Tri-State has made has left the co-op with Tri-State with a $4 billion debt. And if LPA were to stay with Tri-State, we as members would also be responsible for that debt. So additionally, the whole future of Tri-State's business plan hinges on uncertain and unreliable federal loans. And so it was definitely in the best members' interest for stability to find better business partners. Additionally, I think it sounds like our financial outlook is better. Last night, I heard at conversations with Chris that the future of our power supply rate will likely be lower than what we were paying with Tri-State, which is great news. And additionally, we get to benefit from some of the local renewables like the Dolores project that Tri-State's building without being in a really restrictive contract with them, which I think is really great for members as well. So in addition to being an expensive and unreliable business partner, Tri-State's long history of environmental degradation, extremely restrictive contracts, and I do think from what I've heard, they're requiring new members to sign on for another 20 years, so I'm glad that we're not a part of that. And limits on local generation and Tri-State's outdated governance structure are all excellent reasons for LPA's decision to exit its contract. Finally, it's my understanding that the decision to exit is irrevocable. And it seems like there's been a lot of recent member confusion about this. And rather than continuing to rehash a old and irrevocable decision that had plenty of opportunity for comment before, I think it'd be great to concentrate all this member enthusiasm and energy towards looking forward to the future of our power supply. So thank you all, and I'm eager to participate more in this exciting future.
Thank you very much, Emily. Werner Heiber, you're next. Come on into the room and you have the floor.
All right, my name is Werner Heiber and I live in Durango, Colorado. And I really appreciate all the work you have done in the past and most recent. So it is, while the previous speakers talked about being at the present moment, I agree with that. It's very important to look at Tri-State today. Yet, a company has an attitude. And being a geezer, I can go back 25 years and I remember what led to all of this. That was really started when Tri-State tried to put a coal-fired power plant into Kansas, which is outside of its area. This means employment is outside of the area, the money spent is outside the area, the income that people make is outside the area, and they did that. Well, I'm not going to double guess them, but they probably thought they could save a little bit of money, but it would not serve Tri-State people that live within and work and make incomes within Tri-State's area. That money would stay there. So it's remember to know that. And I also it's remember to know how long LPA worked. You did more work with Tri-State trying to have a comfortable or a just agreement And again, the history is that for all these years, Tri-State has been difficult because of the 50-year contract they require, because of that Kansas coal-fired plant, we cost them $100 million without ever getting anything out, just in planning money. They limited us to 5% only. So the question is, Tri-State has an attitude, and can we trust them? And ultimately, that's why LPEA decided to leave. Again, I have been involved, I have watched it, I listened to it. The other aspect is when we leave Tri-State, we don't send money to Tri-State anymore, and we keep much more money locally and jobs locally. We don't export the money. And that's a great benefit to our economy. So I really encourage, I mean, I know you're going to keep on going. I want to thank you for all the work you have done. But while the present moment matters, keep in mind what happened in the past and how we got here. And LPEA has tried very, very hard to work with Tri-State. And at this point, Tri-State and the attitude is still the same. So it's a big corporate facility, a company. They look after their interest, and LPEA, by separating, like Kit Carson has done over 10 years ago and has benefited them financially, leaving Tri-State is the decision that serves our local community the best. Thanks again for your work.
Thank you very much, Werner, for participating today. Moving along, Dave Peters, I see you next, bringing you into the room, and you should have the mic.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So yeah, first off, thanks to the board of directors for your hard work and the staff for their hard work. A couple things I'd like to bring up. First is on communications with members. You know, I polled about 10 people. Hey, did you get the latest email from LPEA? Maybe it was WhatsApp or something like that. And I only found that 3 of 10 people, and they were all members, are getting your emails. So that's something you may want to look at, because I do think we need more transparency and communication with members, and don't just assume that emails will do it. Also, you know, in the last 2 meetings, I've asked for a town hall meeting where LPEA could present all the facts they have or can give us on the tri-state buyout and let members ask questions. And while it's fine for meetings, coffee with Chris, that just reaches a small group. I think that if you had a large town hall meeting and send out US mail notifications, that would clear up a lot of things. And then finally, I got my notice of the rate increases, and I can understand that inflation has hurt all of us, and it's hurt, obviously, supplies that LPEA gets for their maintenance and new projects. But I do note that at a board meeting last fall, that there was discussion on rate increases, and it was discussed that part of the rate increase was in preparation for the buyout and the new debt that would be taken on. So I find it a little disappointing that the rate increase notice to members didn't state that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for being here today. Next in line, Michaela. Go ahead. You have the floor. And you're muted right now.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, we got you.
Yes, I'm an LPEA member. I'm in Hermosa. I'm just wondering, I have a couple of questions. If we were to back out of the buyout with Tri-State, I've been told that that would cost cost us a lot of money. But from one LPEA board member told me that. But then other people who've met with Tri-State have said that that's not necessarily true, that we wouldn't incur, big fines, et cetera. So I'd like to know what the reality of that is. Also, in regards to Mercuria, just from the little brief research I've done, they are its CEO has presented before the World Economic Forum, and so we're aligning ourselves with a certain ideology here. And I'd like to know how firm our commitment to going with Mercuria is. Is that our only choice, et cetera? So I just have a couple of questions there.
Okay, thank you, Michaela. Like as Graham indicated in our sort of preamble, we don't directly address questions from the members in the comment period, but we will do our best to get you those answers through our traditional communication means. So thank you very much for being here and for bringing that to our attention. Let's see, looks like a couple more hands still. I have Cheryl Hunter, if I'm getting that right. And you have the floor, and you're unmuted.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yep.
I'm from Ignacio, and I've lived here for 50 years. Been around paying bills here. I don't really think that going with Mercuria is in our best interest. I know I'm a low income person that's on limited income, so I am very interested in this topic. I think we've been doing fine with Tri-State. I don't see a need to move from Tri-State. Like they say, they've met their goals for renewables. I'm satisfied. I would prefer not to go to a global company that has it's interested, in all the countries in the world here to make money. I'd rather stay with the local people. And you're doing a great job. I know that y'all do. Y'all think this through, and you're a lot smarter than I am. But I really, as a shareholder or a co-op member, would prefer to stay with Tri-State. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks very much for spending some time with us this morning. Let's see, one more hand, I think. Mark Pearson, I see you next, and you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. I'm Mark Pearson. I live in District 4 out Florida Road. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys, and also appreciate the kind of mixed format of meetings where sometimes you're in person and sometimes on Zoom. Like today, there's people from all over LPEA service territory who are able to chime in pretty easily and not need to, travel to Durango to sit in the meeting. So, but I also value the time to meet face to face with you all too. So, I applaud you for the mixed formats of your meetings. I just wanted to suggest getting out a little bit more information on the Mercuria situation, and talking with Dan Harms yesterday at the LPEA community meeting at SCA. It was pretty informative to me to understand better that LPEA itself is actually making most of these power decisions and agreements, and Mercuria sounds like it'll be sort of a minor player in terms of like filling in some gaps here and there, but LPEA is itself the ones who are negotiating, like with the new agreement with Tri-State on off taking some of the Dolores Canyon solar power, and it'd be really exciting if LPEA could strike a deal with Pine River Irrigation District to get the Vicedo hydropower contract and those kind of things. So it sounds like a lot of that is being done in-house, and it's not you're not relying on an outside power provider like Mercuria. And I know a number of years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, when LPEA first started talking about exiting the Tri-State contract and have a power supply committee, and there's a company called Guzman that people were talking about, which I think was much more so in that model of just turn everything over to them and they find all the power for you. But it sounds like the Mercuria deal was much different. So anyway, the more that you can kind of shed light on that, I think the more, informative that'll be to everybody. So again, thanks so much, and look forward to further meetings and the rest of today's meeting, which people have said is going to be very interesting and informative. So I can't wait.
All right, thanks very much, Mark. I think you're right about the rest of the meeting. We have a lot of action to take today. So let's see, a couple more hands went up and we have more time. So I see Dusty Mars, you're next on the list and you have the floor.
Thanks for letting me comment. I know you guys have a lot to get done. My comment was more directed toward the rate increase. I understand that to conduct business and with the inflation rates that are going on, this looks like a necessity that we need to do, but the basis of 7% or the number that we came up with, I've been having trouble kind of finding where that came from. So just a little more transparency on the details behind what you put out. That ends up being over $200 a month rate increase for me during the irrigation season. So it makes an impact, and my understanding of the plans that I had made were based on what Tri-State's energy rate increases had been, and so they had said they weren't increasing rates. So I was a little bit surprised, I guess, at the rate increase and the substantial amount. So that and I just to reiterate the other comments that others had made, I think we need to have a pretty good breakdown or discussion of exactly what the tri-state buyout looks out like right now. Currently, what is the current debt compared to what was injected by federal dollars into the tri-state outlook? Why is it considered by some to be an outside source and by everybody else is considered to be a local co-op and a local source? And just kind of a breakdown, if Mercuria is not supplying any energy and we're still buying it from Tri-State, why do we get a savings in that regard? I think if we can outline some of that stuff in just a better format or have it more clear into those details, people will have a lot more buy-in into where we're going, and it'd just be great to be all on the same page. So thanks for all you guys do. Just see if you can figure out how to clean up some of that communication. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Dusty. Thanks for your comments and your suggestions there. Rachel, would you like the floor before we do our last, or presumably our last question?
No, I was just gonna button up at the very end with some other opportunities to engage.
Okay, I'll give it back to you. I see one more hand and I don't have a name, but it says Durango 6. So we'll bring you into the room and you can introduce yourself. And you're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me
That's
now?
right. Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, this is Fran Reynolds. I'm sorry about the confusion about my old email and
No
new
problem.
name and whatever. But anyway, I appreciate you guys letting us have this time for comments. And I've been listening, and it took me a little bit to figure out how to do the raise the hand with Zoom. Anyway, I've been in Durango 30 years, and my husband is actually an electrical geophysicist. So we can kind of understand the electricity part of things. Pretty much I agree with what Kelly's comments were earlier, and she said it more eloquently than I could. But I want to just say that I don't really understand how it's in the best interest of our co-op members to switch from our nonprofit energy provider, and Tri-State's pretty much been reliable and fiscally affordable, to this Mercuria, which is the for-profit entity that's not looking at our cooperative's best interest necessarily. And I do know that Tri-State's been providing and working towards alternative energy sources too, so I don't understand why the gamble when it seems inevitable that we'll see much higher electricity bills. It's already a challenge to simply afford for most people to live in this county, and it continues to be more challenging, of course, with inflation the way it is. But I just feel like maybe the fundamentals of forming a co-op in the first place need to be revisited and reconfirmed, because as a group, I think we're just looking towards having affordable and reliable energy, and And that's what we've had. So it's just, I don't quite understand the change, and it's going to put us in a lot more debt. So thank you for listening to our comments, and you all take care, and thanks for your hard work.
Yeah. Thanks for your comments today and for joining us, Fran. Okay, I'm gonna don't see any more hands, so I'm gonna shut down member comment. I'm gonna give the floor to Rachel for a second, and then I'm gonna not to put him on the spot, but I'm gonna ask CEO Hansen if there's sort of any commentary he would like to provide after hearing what we did just now from good 30 plus minutes of member comments. So first off, Rachel, what can you share with us?
Well, just thanking everyone for showing up today. I know it's hard to get here and it means a lot, and we are listening. So thank you, and it's informing what we're doing. And then just one thing to highlight, because I know this format is challenging, right? It can be. People are asking great questions, and per the format, we don't answer them. And so just want to encourage you all, if you can, there's a few upcoming events all across the territory. There's one in Ignacio, I believe, tomorrow, one coming up in Pagosa Springs. If you can make those, that's great. If you can't, if you go onto the website and go to the board page, I think it's under About Us, maybe. It's hard to navigate our website, I confess. But here's the calendar of events. That's found in About Us, calendar of events. And then if you go to community, where is it? About Us and Board of Directors, you'll find all of our emails. And so if you want, feel free to email any of us. And I can speak for myself, happy to set up a time to chat, or email us any of these questions and we can get back to you. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Rachel. Lots of ways to get information from La Plata Electric. So to wrap up, Chris, is there anything you'd like to comment on there? And I don't want you're welcome to pass on these, but a couple things that I heard there that I think might be relatively easy to factually address are some confusion over how Mercuria is helping LPEA. And then also, how set are we on, like, how, can we go back to Tri-State? What are the repercussions there? And feel free, like, I don't want to put you on the spot and ask you to discuss anything that isn't really prepared, but those are some of the things that I heard that I thought might be able to be cleared up.
Yeah, thank you, Ted, very much, and great to be with everyone here for the March board meeting. Yeah, I think it probably makes sense just for a quick set of factual additions to our conversation here this morning. And so I've got 4 things I was going to mention, and thank you. I've got those 2 on my list as well, just to give people information that have attended our board meeting. First, yeah, we've signed a settlement agreement with Tri-State. And so at this point, that is legally binding, that settlement agreement. And so that the kind of idea that we're going to do a 180 and reverse is really, I think the ship has sailed, so to speak. That decision was made over a year ago. We've signed a settlement agreement with Tri-State. We've now signed PPAs with Tri-State that are commercial bilateral agreements, not as a member of Tri-State as we leave on April 1st, 2026. And so, yeah, I think it's very clear from a legal standpoint, where we are, and FERC has already ruled on the conditions of that settlement. And so that is a final legal and binding agreement. The second thing you mentioned was on Mercuria. Mercuria is a wholesale commodity trader. They trade in lots of different commodities, including electricity. They are assisting us with buying wholesale electricity in the market for about a 20-month period. From April of 2026 until the end of 2027. That is our relationship with Mercuria. We'll be finalizing all the details on that, and we'll have some announcements on the price of power. What we have been able to get to at this point is that price of wholesale electricity is actually lower than our current price of wholesale electricity. So that's the good news that we'll be sharing more widely with the Mercuria relationship. but it is a relatively minor part of what we're doing with our power supply over the next several years. The other thing that we received in member comments over the last month was some concern about the CEO salary. That is a matter of public record. The previous CEO was paid $524,000 in 2023. My contract is for $500,000 in 2026. So just to clear up any misinformation that might be out there about the CEO contract, that is part of our public filings as a nonprofit corporation. The final thing I'll mention is just to pick up on Rachel's comment about community engagement. Been doing a number of different types of events in different locations at different times throughout the day, trying our very best to meet people where they're at, both physically and in the both during and after work hours. We'll continue that in Pagosa and in Ignacio over the next few days. Had one last night in Durango, and we'll continue to have those events several times a month over the next several months. So hope to see people at those events. Those are always can be found on our calendar events on our website, or of course, reach out to me or any of the board members if you need any details. So Ted, thanks for a moment just to provide a little bit more information, and looking forward to the rest of the board meeting.
All right, great, Chris. Yeah, appreciate that. Extremely informative, and thanks for getting that clear and factual information out there. So much appreciated. So we'll move now beyond the member comment period. Next item on our agenda is the consent board items. So as usual, if anyone wants any clarity on those, this would be the time to ask for that. If none of that is required, then we could take a motion to approve the consent board items.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent board items from Kohler.
Thank you, Kohler. Do we have a second?
Rachel,
Nicole, seconded by Nicole. Okay. Any discussion on approval of consent board items? Tim Wheeler.
Did we approve the agenda yet?
Yeah, we did. And we actually got, I don't know if I'm going to call it your modification, but we did get the FAC modification in there.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Joe Lewandowski?
Yeah, in the area where we talk about the money going back to estates who are no longer members. I just wanted to ask, that is something that we do every month, and I believe this month it was about $7,000 a month. I think the refunds went from, I don't know, $200 to $3,000. And I'm wondering, is that for maybe Patrick, if you can answer this in general? I mean, that's something we do as a co-op. That's a co-op member, I guess, benefit, you could say. And is that, are those numbers fairly steady throughout the years? Do you know?
Yeah, I would say from month to month, it has a fair consistency about it. It's obviously hard to predict because that's based on a mortality rate, but it generally doesn't deviate too much, Joe.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to say that is, again, one of the member benefits of being in a cooperative. Thank you.
Anything else on consent board before we go to vote? Sorry, all in favor then of approving the consent board items, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, seeing none. Yeah, consent board approved. Sorry, I'm just playing technical over here. On to the next section, which is CEO and staff reports. So I'll hand the mic over to CEO Hansen at this point.
All right, thanks very much, Ted. And just would point everyone to our monthly dashboard document that's in the board packet. I'm going to be just running through some of the highlights from that document. And of course, always happy to take questions as we go or at the end of that presentation. But let's start with our key performance indicators, and we'll get this up on the screen for everyone. Thanks, Drew. All right, on the first slide, this is looking very similar to what we saw in January. I do want to highlight the cash reserves. This is actually was pre-planned. We planned to to go lower on our cash reserves because of this timing of our rate change, which is on the agenda, of course, for today. But it meant that we were going to be drawing down some of those cash reserves and not going into our lines of credit just to maintain a cash reserves and therefore avoiding interest costs. So while this number is lower than our goal or our target, this was something that we pre-planned for as we considered the rate change. So I don't think any great concern there. And we do have plenty of liquidity available if we were to need it for some reason because of the lines of credit that we have in place. So just want to address the one outlier here on our key performance indicators. On the other indicators, we're well within our target zones. Also want to point out that we had great results from our beneficial electrification. That had been a bit low in some of the previous months. We got good data catching up with us there, and beneficial electrification sales well above target. So that's always good to see as part of our overall plan. Let's go on to the next slide. Continuing our streak of no lost time incidents. That continues in February and continuing 100% compliance on our safety measures. Fortunately, no cyber issues either. Also had a great chance to look at our cyber issues with the team through a cybersecurity grant. So great to get that work done in the month of February. You can see our cyber team there in the picture, including the head of that team, Drew Timmerman. On to our next slide and our goal. Yeah,
Chris, let's grab a couple hands.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Thanks,
so,
Ted. I can't see all of those, so thanks.
That's all right. I'll keep tabs on that. So I see Rachel's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. This has to do with the last slide, be excellent in all that we do. And yeah, that's so exciting, so cool to have the outside expertise to come in and kind of assess and make any recommendations. And I'm just curious the impressions that left, if there's any big work or shifts in approach that were indicated through that expertise and assessment.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. It's a great question, and I'll turn to Drew, who was helping to lead the charge on that.
Yeah, it really was a great week that we spent with this consultant, and to be honest, the best thing that came out of it was just really reinforcing all the things that we've been doing. So we got a lot of praise on the efforts so far, but there's always more that we could do, and so it was really helpful to figure out where we should focus our efforts. So as far as resources, our time, and where we should spend money, because there's always vendors that want to sell you silver bullets and things like that, and so it's really about being responsible and figuring out where to best put our efforts. So it was great. We learned quite a bit, but yeah, it was time well spent.
Nice, great to hear. Thanks for keeping us all cyber safe.
Yeah, thanks.
And then over to you, Kirsten.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Hey, Chris, on your safety slide here, the point achieved 100% compliance in February, and I'm looking at the title, which is ensure culture of safety with 0 lost time incidents and continuous improvement. So I'm not sure when you say achieved 100% compliance in February, what you mean. And since safety is a big issue for us, it helps me to be more clear for myself.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. I'm going to ask Elizabeth to provide some extra detail there as she's heading up our safety efforts.
Super.
Absolutely. So we have a compliance calendar that we look at for each month, and it includes a number of compliance safety trainings. We have other outside of safety as well. And if you kind of expand this category, we have a lot of bullet points that can fit under this particular target. But we do, just I apologize. I have severe allergies right now. I took some allergy medicine this morning. I feel like I'm speaking in a bubble. So yeah, we have an online learning management system. We have tabletop drills. And this is a calendar that we put together for each month. And again, like this is an internal measure for safety and beyond, but it's all related to being compliant with regulatory agencies, and we actually have a level higher than that, where we just want to make sure we're training our employees in the best way possible. And if you want to talk about any of the specific ones, I'm happy to do that offline, Kirsten.
Oh, okay, I appreciate it. So this is compliance with regulatory safety, and how we track that is via a calendar. So this is, I would appreciate at some point in education, and I will take that offline, as far as, does that mean, we're changing out our safety gloves every whatever, or we're getting them tested and such as that. And you don't need to go into that detail, but safety is so important. And if you would go back one more slide, who's ever running the show here, when we look at this one slide that, supposedly if we only looked at one slide every day, this is what we would look at. And for safety, we've got that average safety meeting attendance as our safety indicator. And for me, I'm wondering if it's maybe this for me, that doesn't tell me, gosh, are we a safe organization, because we go to meetings. So my challenge to all of us is, what is our KPI for safety, and can it be more clear to this? And that's not a challenge to you, Elizabeth, necessarily. It's a challenge to Chris and to all of us to think through, what do I really want to know here under safety? And I will get off my soapbox. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kirsten. Joe Lewandowski, you're next.
Yeah, I guess this for Drew, and I like the dashboards because they really give, I think, our members an insight into the complications of running a co-op every day. And Drew, I was wondering, could you just describe a few of the challenges that you're running into? I guess my understanding is almost a minute by minute basis, and kind of how you deal with that. I know cybersecurity seems to be just a growing risk, especially with AI coming on.
Yeah, so it is one of those things where we feel like we have to get it right every time, and the bad guys just have to get it right once. So it's a constant challenge for us. I would say, maybe one of the bigger challenges is we've got so much data to analyze that you need to take all these different data points and put them together to try to figure out, is this a real legitimate threat, or is this just somebody knocking on the door that's no big deal and we can just, keep the door shut? So those sort of things, I would say. The threats are getting more sophisticated. They're more patient. It seems like it wasn't too long ago that attackers would just hit you really hard, and it was pretty obvious what was happening. And now they're doing these advanced persistent threats where it's just taking one baby step at a time. And so you really have to be listening very closely for those threats. So I would say that's kind of probably our biggest challenge.
And I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Drew. Onward, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just quickly, Kirsten, thank you for the pointing out, the KPI question. I'm very happy to think through how we might enhance this dashboard, and if there another safety KPI that we want to add here. So thank you for that comment. Let's go ahead and go to slide number 4, which is keep the lights on. A few things to highlight here. I was very pleased to join our crew, spent a morning with our line crews as they were changing out some of these 30 rejected polls. We do regular poll testing to make sure that they're in good shape, and the ones that are not up to standard, we start the process of changing those out. And so I was able to join the crews as they looked at 4 rejected or polls that needed to be changed on the north side of town. So that was really fun to be a part of seeing that work in action. Also want to definitely highlight on this particular slide the completion of the Animas Valley 45 kV transmission rebuild. Got through that work in a really timely manner, on budget, on time. Always, some twists and turns with a big project like that. But we've got the circuits back to normal, and don't need to use the mobile substation anymore. So really excited to have that project online, and it's one of the most visible ones in our territory because everybody driving north out of Durango can see that construction. So really great to have that one done. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the really incredible efforts from our line crews on February 14th. During one of our special board meeting on February 14th, a couple of us actually lost power temporarily on the west side of town because of that snowstorm. And we had several areas in Archuleta County that were out for many hours because of the heavy snow that fell on February 14th. But our incredible crews got everybody back online by the late part of the afternoon that day. Really incredible efforts through very difficult conditions. And so a big thank you to our line crews for that great work. We had everything back in order, as I said, by late afternoon. So, and for folks listening in today, we always keep our public outage map up and updated on our website. So if you ever need to track that, of course, we've got our automated notices that go out to folks via text and email if there is an outage in their area. So we're always trying to communicate the best we can in those tough situations where we've got a bad storm or other issues that come up. But really proud of our team for the big response on February 14th. All right, let's go on to the next slide.
Let me grab, I think Joe's hand is still up.
Great.
Yeah, I just kind of again, a comment and a question on the replacement of the poles. I know we have thousands of poles in our service area, but if one of those fell in the wrong place, that would be in enormous circumstances possibly. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, are those all over are we looking at that all over the service area continually? And, what kind of costs are we looking at when we have to just replace, 30 poles like this or even one pole?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Well, yeah, so to answer your first question, so we have 40,000 poles within our service territory. So this is a pretty low failure rate, if you think of it that way. But yeah, we do a number of different types of inspection, both visual, overhead with drones. In this case, the poles that were identified, we actually do a core test where we do a very small drill into the base of the pole to figure out if the density and the structural integrity is still there for that pole. In this case, we had several that were identified where it failed that test. And that failing that test doesn't mean that they're going to fall over, tomorrow, but it means that they are reaching the end of their life. And so we proactively do those pole changeouts. As far as the cost of those replacements, it really depends on the location and how much is on the line and how much work is needed to redo the footings and the base. So it's a little bit hard to say, this is how much it costs for a pole because it's really depends on the situation. But this is a regular part of our operations and maintenance. We're constantly inspecting, constantly making improvements and changing out bad poles. But hopefully that's responsive to your question. I'm happy to get you kind of pole by pole financial information if that's useful.
Well, I'm a pole, so anyway, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions on this one?
I think we can keep going.
Okay. All right. So to our next slide.
Really sorry. I think Rachel's hand went down and back up. So
yep,
sorry to jump in there.
Oh, I think I was curious if you're asking about source clean local. That's where I have a question. So if we're not there yet, I'll hold off.
Go through the slide, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so on to slide number 5, and we'll see if I can anticipate Rachel's question here or not. But we've got, I think, a lot of great things happening in this area. Many of these parts are going to be coming to the board over the next several months as we look at specific proposals for PPAs and other parts of our energy transition. But importantly, in the month of February, we did submit our NITS, the Network Integration Transmission Service application to Tri-State, so that we're all ready for our transition on the transmission side. So that is in place. We're continuing to make progress on our PACE award. We did get some indication that those funds are being reconsidered right now by the Department of Agriculture. And so we'll continue to work hard to make sure we can bring in that support for our PACE award, which is really helpful for us for the types of projects that we're looking at inside the service territory. So those are some of the big highlights from this particular area. And Rachel, over to you.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I was understanding the 100 hours of subject matter expertise for technical assistance. If I'm correct, this is trying to explore that question around grid congestion, and someone in member comments had mentioned like, hey, are we working to try to figure out how to get more solar on the grid, rooftop solar, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is one proactive step we're trying to take to figure it out, and some of the physics constraints and things, or I probably said that wrong, but.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly right, Rachel. Yeah, definitely. As was once joked to me, the laws of physics have been undefeated for 14.5 billion years. So you're absolutely right. We've got to make sure we've got a system that obeys the laws of physics. And one of the ways we're doing that is with this grant. But let me turn to Dan Harms, because Dan and his team have been leading the work on this important issue.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And spoiler alert for next month's board report, we were actually awarded this 100 hours. So good news. So we had our actual kickoff meeting with NREL yesterday, and we are targeting to better understand these screens that are set up by the PUC, to understand how applicable they are to our specific situation. So then we can make educated decisions on what our next move is going to be. If this is a constraint that's relative to rotating machineries and rotating machines, and we're looking at internet or sources, then we can make a decision to open some things up too. So this is exactly right. Just trying to understand those screens better. They set them up for a reason. We just have to better understand how applicable those are to our situation specifically.
Cool, and congrats. That's awesome.
Great. Let's see, Dan Huntington, I see you have your hand up over there.
Yes, I just wanted to point out to Joe that probably those poles that were replaced are 40+ years old. So anyway, it's just something that needs to be upgraded all the time.
Yep, thanks, Dan. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Onward. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, if there are no other questions on this slide, we'll keep going to slide number 6 on our community partnerships. You know, I think we've had a few of these come up already in the conversation with some of our members during the comment period, but really excited to be a part of continued community outreach. We're doing a lot of different types of events like Coffee with Chris and community conversations, Earth Day coming up. Going to be talking to the Pagosa Rotary Club this week, have been in front of the county commissions and the town councils, and we'll just continue to do that constant outreach work. Also lots of back and forth with our tribal partners at the Southern Ute Nation. So really enjoying this part of the job. It's one of my favorite parts of the job, and really just trying to make sure that we've got many channels, and that our staff, you know, not just me, but the entire staff has lots of different ways to connect with the community. Also doing a lot of things with Durango Chamber of Commerce and the Region 9 Economic Development folks as well. So a lot of good places to interact here. And of course, you know, for the board members, if there's some blind spot or some area you'd like to see us do more, please just let us know. Always love getting invitations to come to different types of events. A big thank you to Kohler for his help, helping us make connections with folks like the Farm Bureau and the Grange, among others, and making sure we're connecting with those types of groups on a regular basis. So big thank you to Kohler for that.
And let's give Kohler the floor.
Okay. I really appreciate what's going on right now with these Coffee with Chris's and like last night's community discussions. I think they're very, very important, but I have had a few people that said they can't find out about it. And I'm not too sure why, because obviously I get informed on them quite a bit as a director, but it might be something we look at the website and see how easy it is to find these, you know, for someone that's interested. And I, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I get them quite a bit. And I've gotten a lot of the emails that I talked about the election in the last couple of days. I think it's really, really good. But obviously, there's a lot of people that aren't getting that. So just something to take a look at so that we can keep this stuff going. I think it's important, and I think it's very valuable for the members. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Kohler. And yeah, we are definitely wanting to, always improve our website as one of the ways we get the word out. We do have the community calendar that folks can access, but it takes a couple of clicks to get there. So as we're doing our website redesign, this will be top of mind for us as one of the ways we can make that even easier for members. But I appreciate that reminder, and yeah, we'll keep trying to use multiple channels to get the word out and reach people.
Thanks. And over to Tim Wheeler.
Yeah, Chris, it's quite a busy schedule you've had there. So that's much appreciated. And I'm glad you like it because you're doing a lot of it. And I'm curious about to what extent your calendar of meeting with various community members and so forth is included in that community calendar on the website. So what visibility, if somebody wants to, hear you in a different venue than Coffee with Chris or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was just thinking, the meetings I had, let's say with, I've got had a meeting last month with the Archuleta County Commission. I have one scheduled for coming up in April to go back and meet with the County Commission because of some important projects that are happening in Archuleta County. I have not put those on the community calendar because they're public meetings which are announced through in this case, the County Commission website, but no reason I couldn't, and make sure folks know where I'm going to be. So we can definitely take a look at that. But yeah, doing lots of different types of community events that, aren't LPEA sponsored, but I'm there representing LPEA that, and not just myself, but of course, other team members doing lots of different things that we don't always put on the community calendar. We're typically focusing just on our sponsored events for that particular website.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Chris. Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, so just so the folks who are maybe newer to this know, there's a bunch of us that have been working just on a voluntary basis. We're really interested in this community engagement side of things. As has been mentioned, it's so important. So how do we do it best and better? And one of the best practices we've been talking about in that group is making sure that for all this community engagement we're doing, that, Chris is out there, for some of us who aren't able to join or what have you, making sure we're closing the loop and sharing back any relevant learnings with the rest of us so we can all kind of incorporate what the community is saying. And so, Chris, I'm just curious if you were to summarize, synthesize all the things you're gathering up so far, what would be those bullet points that would be germane to the board that you're learning or hearing that hasn't maybe been covered elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, for the question. I think the interactions I've had thus far, if there's a way to summarize what is dozens of hours of these different types of meetings, I would say they're very similar to some of the themes we heard in the comments we've had before the last several board meetings, which is people asking questions, wanting more information about our transition, people wanting information about our operations. What's happening in my neighborhood or my neck of the woods often comes up depending on the location. What are the investments we're making to upgrade the grid? What does the future of our power supply look like? So a lot of similar themes and questions that I think the board is hearing, in public comment, and kind of mirrors what I'm hearing in these different sessions that we've just described. So, I don't think any major difference between the themes and the general areas. But I think, just reaching more people in more venues is always the goal, and trying to make sure we get to every part of the service territory on a regular basis.
Awesome. Sounds good. Moving on.
All right, let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. We've got a few things I want to just quickly highlight from, prepare for the future. I think we may miss one. Slide 8. Oh, that's interesting. It's in, there it is. There it is. All right. And the picture in the bottom is the community coffee that we had at Smiley Cafe, the one we did in Durango. I did want to point out a couple of quick things from this slide. I had the chance to get invited to the Aspen Transmission Forum. As board members know, the regional transmission organization and the regional grid is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. And I think key to our success in the coming decade is to make sure that we've got great access to the regional grid. And so I was really pleased to be a part of that forum. There was a wonderful gathering of national experts in Aspen. So it was nice to be relatively close by to be able to drive over to that and join that conversation on behalf of LPEA. I think the good news is there's a lot of interest in strengthening the grid in this part of the country. And we will ultimately, I think, be beneficiaries of that stronger grid. As I look to the next section there on the broadband, we did evaluate some 5G technology on our transmission corridors and looked at that technology vis-a-vis some of the efforts that Clear Networks is working on right now with state and federal BEAD money proposals that they have in to try to get more grant money to support final mile connection. So lots of great things happening there. We're going to continue to support that rollout of fiber across our territory. Of course, we're supporting things like pull attachments and supporting grant initiatives to help do those final mile connections, but not ultimately responsible for that. That's the job of Vero Networks and Clear Networks. But really happy to report that we keep making progress on those pull attachments and supporting those types of technologies. So we'll have that remains, one of our indicators that we read out to the board every month. You can see the hundreds and sometimes, more than 1,000 pull attachments that we are involved in on a regular basis. So those are, I guess, the big highlights here. I did want to quickly mention the one right above the picture, which the board's going to be hearing more about in the coming weeks and months, which is the RFP process that we're getting ready to launch. We did select a third-party vendor to help us with that process. They're called TEA, is the vendor name, the Electricity Authority. They've done hundreds of these types of processes around the country, and they're going to be providing more information to the board about our future RFP process. So it was great to get that accomplished in the month of February. But any questions on this one?
I see Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple things. First, did you go through the financial slide already, or?
I have not. That's the next one, Tim.
Okay.
Might have got, yeah, we got a little shuffled there, but I think we're going to hit it.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. The other one is, could I hear more about the applications for the Department of Energy's, the 2 grants mentioned there, Iron Horse and Pagosa West?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll ask Dan to help me with the details on those grants.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So this was a grant opportunity that we had with the DOE that we did submit 2 applications for, one where we are the primary applicant and one where we are a secondary applicant. We are the primary on the geothermal project that we're proposing. As you see here, it's a $142 million project with a $50 million grant request. There would also be ITC funding involved with that one. So that is a application that we did get submitted. And then there's also a development in Pagosa Springs that trying to address the infrastructure needs for. And there was a great idea to go ahead and put this in with the county, Archuleta County being the primary, where they can get a much larger, or they have to put forth a smaller matching portion than it would be if we were. And we could only be the primary applicant on one application. So this worked out really well. We were the secondary, got both of these submitted, and hopefully we get some funding out of those.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah.
Good news.
Rachel, you go.
I think, and this is just a point out, you know, these are just grant applications, but they're indicative of energy opportunities in our service territory, correct? And so this is a great example of one of the reasons why we are looking for this buyout, whatever we're calling our energy transition is taking place, because it's allowing for some really amazing opportunity locally, which increases the tax base, which allows for streets and roads and all the things. And so again, this is all grants, but an example of what's possible.
Good comment. Thank you, Rachel. Kirsten, you're next.
Yes, on that Iron Horse geothermal power project, can you give us a 30-second, how big, what are we talking about? Is it new technology? Yeah, quick education, if you would, please.
Yeah, we've been working with a lot of local developers in our area, trying to understand the geothermal potential here. And luckily, we have a lot of talent in the oil and gas industry, a lot of wells that have already been drilled. So good indicative test information that they can go back and check earth temperatures at certain levels. And it looks like a great opportunity for some geothermal. Now, you never know until you actually look at the exact location that you want to put a project, but nearby wells indicate that there's good potential at these areas. So there's a lot of test drilling. A test drill would have to be made to really verify the resource and everything going forward. And that's happening at another nearby location. So this is about a 20 megawatt project. This would involve, you know, first you have to drill the hole to verify the resource, and if that's there, then there's laterals that go from that to harness the most geothermal potential in the layer that you're looking at.
So 20 megawatt project, early days. This is verifying a resource, or?
Yeah, and this is connected with another project that these things sort of coincide with each other. If the other test well that's going nearby this one was not productive, we would have to reassess our situation here.
And I'm sure that you have looked at the thermal gradient wells that were drilled over in Pagosa 7 years ago. And so just another source of information for you. Although this doesn't sound like this is going to be thermal gradient. This is thermal gradients have already been determined. This is figuring out if the resource is actually there.
And the project involves building the resource, actually building the resource, yes. This is not just for a test well. This is actually deployment of the resource.
I'm glad we're further along then, because when I first saw that, I was afraid we were back in the early stuff, and that the risk there is so high because so frequently the answer is it ain't there. Okay, so thank you very much.
Oh, Nicole, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just thank you for getting that all that rich feedback about this project, because certainly a lot of curiosity with that one line item. And since we're talking about it, what is a potential timeline, Dan, on the project?
Yeah, there's actually a schedule to start the test well in the vicinity of this. That would be a confirmation. You could say a confirmation well. That is slated to begin this year. This drilling maybe in the summer time frame, hopefully good confirmation towards the end of this year. We cannot actually start on a project when we go out for a grant. We cannot start on a project before the grant is awarded, because then that'll nullify our project.
Okay, and when will we know about the grant?
That's going to be later this year as well. A lot of these windows are moving a bit. I would have to go double check exactly when this one is, and I'll try to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving forward or backward or wherever we need to go to find the next slide.
All right. Yeah. Great questions. Appreciate the digging a little deeper, as they say, on geothermal. So this is great. Let's go on to the final slide of the dashboard, which is our financial health slide. And we'll be turning here in a second to Patrick for extra detail, but did want to highlight, that we're in a really solid position financially. I did mention kind of the planned level of our cash reserves. We're doing that on purpose and had planned ahead for that, and didn't see any reason to go into our lines of credit and incur interest expense. But we'll see this steadily improve assuming that we move forward with the rate adjustment, which will help us improve our cash position. The other thing I wanted to highlight was we've made some great progress on preparation for our first credit rating. We've been working with Fitch and with our friends at CFC to help prepare for that process. I think that's going to be a really wonderful moment of self-evaluation and getting some external feedback on our financial metrics and our financial position. And have a huge thank you to Patrick and his whole team for the hard work they've been putting in getting us ready for that process. But let me turn it over to Patrick now to see if there's additional detail he would like to provide.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. For February, operating margins came in at a positive 210,000 versus a budgeted 253,000, which is a shortfall of 43,191. And that's primarily driven by a really mild February. While pleasant, it was negative on our margins. We saw gross margins were 5% under budget, with revenue 7% under budget, driven primarily by a reduction in residential kilowatt hours sold, and cost of power was better than budget by 8%, which offset that revenue loss, but not entirely. And we were able to improve margin by controlling expenses. We were better than budget by $168,496 in controllable expenses, which got us to that bottom line of 210,000 that I mentioned to start with. One of the things I wanted to talk about is our cash position. We have a lot of inflationary pressures. I can't deny that. And those are continuing. We're getting signals from some of our vendors that we're seeing continued price increases. This puts pressure on our cash. The other thing is, congratulations to the team for the Animas Valley rebuild. That was a significant capital expenditure, but it had to be done. So kudos to the team for getting that done. The timing of capital expenditures is somewhat difficult to predict because it's impacted by vendor availability, by weather. A number of factors can cause that to be less than linear as far as how that goes. So that cash came at the front of the year. I will say that we continuously monitor our capital projects. That's the major spend that we do at LPEA, reinvesting in our plan and expanding our plant where beneficial. So we evaluate that on a monthly basis, if not weekly, depending on what the situations are. We will continue to evaluate that and evaluate our cash position. We have 120 days plus of liquidity on available to us right now, which is a comfortable place to be. But by avoiding drawing on those lines of credit, we have foregone an estimated close to $1 million in interest expense over the last year. Some of that was from some beneficial cash positions that we had on hand. So leveraging cash rather than borrowing has saved quite a bit in interest expense, but we will continue to monitor that. It is possible we will draw from the line of credit mid-year, July. As we have forecasted out our cash flow, we see our lowest point in July. We will monitor that month to month and be as precise as we can to leverage our cash position and minimize interest expense. The other piece on the balance sheet that I will point out, it's this time of year as we wait for our audit to close. You see we have margins from prior year. This is a temporary holding place while we have not allocated margins from 2024 yet. We wait till our audit close as we migrate margins into patronage capital. This is a temporary holding place until that process is complete. It does cause some variance there, so I wanted to articulate that as it's a large variance.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Any questions on this slide? Any other detail folks would like to hear about?
Question from Kirsten.
Yeah, Patrick, thank you for this. You've got the thing about the first credit rating this summer. do we get rated by all the agencies or just by one and they
Hmm.
share it?
Just by Fitch, thankfully,
Okay.
because it is not without cost to go through this process. Now, while there's cost, there's also benefit, and the benefits outweigh the cost by a long shot. We can, maintaining a solid credit rating, you negotiate better terms for financing enhancements as far as credit enhancements. You can get better rate at some points just because of being reliable partners. So it is a very beneficial thing to go through. And I would say from a fiscal disciplinary process, it's excellent that we're doing this right now. But Fitch will be the only vendor that we're engaging with.
Okay. Thank you for that. I had a chance to hear a representative from Fitch and a representative from Moody's at the NRECA annual meeting, and I think I dropped the recording of that to you. If I didn't, remind me to, and I will. And it was fascinating. This is a whole new world for me. I've never been associated, well, at this level with having to do a credit rating. So I appreciate that there's stuff to learn. I do have one question about it. So you said it can help us with does CFC really care about our credit rating, or do they just care that we have members that will be paying bills?
The latter rather than the former. It's not that they do their own credit rating. They have an intimate access to our financials, and they do their own in-house credit evaluation. So they have been a partner in strategizing. Their CFO has been through this many times, and they are key on what to feature, where, for me, it's like how long should our multi-year capital plan be, that type of question. So 3 years, for instance, rather than, wasting an additional, however many days it takes to put together a 5-year forecast, that type of support has been, it's been invaluable, Kirsten, as far as being precise with our productivity.
Cool. Thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate it. I'll probably have more questions throughout this year as we go through it, because this is, again, new territory for me.
You know where to find me, please.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. Thanks for helping us learn with you. Onward, what's next?
All right, well, yeah, Ted, that is the last slide from the dashboard. And so, yeah, just want a big thank you to the team for a great month of February. I think we've continued that momentum into March, and I look forward to telling you about it at our April meeting. But lots of great work in progress, and hopefully folks were able to see that come through in the dashboard, and really appreciate the questions and conversation, and always looking for ways to improve this part of the board meeting. So please let me know if there's other information that I can add to the dashboard. But Ted, back to you.
All right, yeah. I see, Dan, your hand's up. So you got something to add before we leave this section, or you put your hand down?
Yeah, just to follow up on Nicole's question on the timing of that grant, we will know late spring on whether or not we are invited to submit a full application. So they have to come back to us. We submit sort of like a letter of interest at this point. Then they come back, we submit the full application, and then it's a process, in other words.
Thanks for the clarity, Dan. Thanks for looking that up and getting back to us. Kirsten, what else do you have for us?
Sorry, in my notes, it says page 16 of the dashboard, but did the dashboard? So anyway, the question that was based on page 16 of the dashboard is, where are we with movement on strategic planning and getting that on a calendar and making that a good practice?
Yeah. Go ahead, Ted. I was going to
send the question to both you guys, so I don't care who answers it.
We'll point at each other on that one. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know, Chris. I'm going to shake my head just like you're shaking your head.
I think I've got an answer. Yeah, Kirsten, that is planned for process with the board this summer. We've got a proposed calendar that we'll be bringing to everyone with that work plan for the rest of the year. And I've got follow-up on that plan for us in June.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chris.
Mm-hmm. As do I. Okay, then we'll close out the report section and move on to section 5 of the agenda, which is where the work happens, board action agenda. Let's kick that off. Nicole with the Committee on Policies update.
Okay, thank you. So no action that the board needs to take. We did remove policy 101 from the consent agenda. We want to make sure there was a clear outline for board members to get policies that need review, addition, or deletion. So we kind of cleaned up that language. We are going to hopefully have, or we have it on the consent agenda for Monday. So if you have anything you want to add, please do that there. And otherwise, it will come back to you guys in April to approve the revised policy 101. We started discussion on 102. This is going to be a pretty robust discussion. We didn't get very far, but hopefully we'll get through it on Monday. So once again, I put a link in the notes so that you can do the red line version. Those are super helpful way to work together. A couple information, just things we cleaned up with, statements of timelines that certain policies need to be reviewed, and we were able to delegate that on a calendar to legal and a process for those specific policies to be reviewed back during the COP annually. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
Just since COP is on Monday and I can't make that, this is actually asking for understanding what this actually means. So this is policy 101 4B, and Graham Berger is up because it's written like how lawyers talk, and I'm trying to understand if this is basic. So it reads, for those out there, although the board intends that its policies will be followed by the CEO and staff in carrying out the business of the cooperative, such policies are intended as guidelines for the board, and the board may make exceptions to such policies without formal amendment thereto based upon the facts and circumstances under consideration. So that, if I'm understanding, it's saying they're just handrails, but not binding if we can justify why we would step outside of a policy. Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay. And then this next part, board policies are not intended to vest rights in any member or group of members unless they have been duly adopted and promulgated as part of a published schedule of tariffs, rates, or charges. What does that mean?
So first off, this is sort of maybe nice to speak to, as there was some confusion when we published our rate tariff, right, which is a schedule of multiple rates. It's nothing to do with economic tariffs that have been proposed in any way by our federal government, right? So this is a unique definition, but a published schedule of rates, tariffs, and charges, and our rules and regulations are basically what if we were a governed utility by the Public Utilities Commission, that would be the sort of document that the Public Utilities Commission would need to review and check off on. Because we're self-regulating, the board regulates those. So my short list of documents that fall into that category are electric service regulations, right? And our rate tariffs. And so basically that's the idea. And as I've been part of discussions with other co-op attorneys around the state about, when is it a tariff and when is it a rule and things of that nature, right? That's sort of the line that they draw of these sort of official recorded documents that would normally be reviewed by the Public Utilities Commission are in that category, and our policies and procedures, they're like an employee handbook, or we, as the board is aware of, we have management level directives that sort of work as the sort of functional day-to-day operational equivalent of a board policy. We're a very policy driven organization, and so we have a lot of these guidelines that help us make consistent decisions on a day-to-day basis, but don't quite rise to the level of a vested right, if that makes sense. Right. And
You're muted, Rachel.
Can you define vested right in the way a third grader would understand?
So, so our bylaws, our articles of incorporation, are any statutory right. These are sort of things that you could, I guess maybe the best way to describe it off the top of my head is that, you know, you could bring a lawsuit based on this, right? Sort of like as a member of the co-op, something is stated in the bylaws, and I have a vested expectation in that, that way. Does that make sense?
I just Googled it. It's a right that is fully and unconditionally secured to an individual, meaning it cannot be taken away or diminished without their consent. So that helps me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Rachel, I don't think what you just read is third grade, but at least I appreciate you asking, because I wasn't quite sure either. You had brought up the thing about policies are guidelines, and yes, they are. And when we aren't able to or need to break a policy, we vote to change the policy. We don't just say, we ain't gonna do this. We have to vote. Is that, Graham, is that correct? Don't we vote to change a policy? We don't just say, oh, well, we're not gonna do this anymore, or we're gonna ignore it.
So, I was not exactly part of the drafting of Policy 101, as you can see from the stamp on the top of it. It was last reviewed in 2016. And so I think the idea is that there be that some of this is designed to identify in, as you can see in section 3A, that the policies are subordinate to the law, to the subordinate to the bylaws, subordinate to the articles of incorporation, subordinate to the rules and regulations of the cooperative. And so the idea being that the board has some operational flexibility in these policies, right? And so I think, but you're right? If you're making a policy change, and I'm not in a position to sort of come up with a meaningful hypothetical on the spot, but if that were the case, this is giving you that sort of operational authority to say we're
okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into the details of 101. I'm just trying to, because there's been some questions about policies and are we following our own policies? I wanted to be clear that they are guidelines. And if we're not following our policies, we need to, or we need to say, this is why we're not following our policy, and let's change the policy. Is that just conceptually, is that right? And I know I shouldn't ask a lawyer about concepts, but certainly from a board thing, we follow these. And if we can't follow them, we change them. Is that conceptually correct?
I think that's right. You know, I mean, in general, right? And that's been the pattern of practice since I've been here, right? Is if we found a policy that is inconsistent with good governance, we amend that policy and bring it up to date.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions about this? Well, if I can, Kirsten, just as a non-legal response to what you said, I consider the policies, I mean, they're very different than the bylaws. The policies to me are an attempt for the board to build on the collective consciousness of the boards before and after. It's a way to have continuity that in a board that is constantly being changed over, and to have an agreement, a strategic agreement of how we are going to conduct business. But it's not meant to be something that cannot be fluid. Unlike, you know, the bylaws obviously are very different. The process of changing policies are much easier, and they should be, and it should be part of a conversation we can have. But it's not, it's very different legally than our bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay. And if there's no further questions, I will pass the mic back to Ted.
Cool. Thanks a bunch, Nicole. Let's see, on to 5B, Finance and Audit Committee update. And just to remind myself and the rest of us that we did strike little Roman numeral 2 from the agenda. So Tim, your update and any action required on Roman numeral 1.
Yeah, thank you. The FAC report is in the board. We had a good meeting as usual. Lots of good participation. And there is one action that, or one recommendation, an action we took at committee around final patronage capital credit under the tri-state rate schedule. There's a resolution accordingly for that. And it was reviewed with analysis by Patrick as the VP of Finance in the meeting. And I'm happy to make the recommendation that we approve resolution 2025-04. But I believe there are some board members who have expressed a desire to have a little more information, because the spreadsheet is kind of, the analysis is a little wonky for some people. We love that, but others maybe need a little more time to absorb all those numbers in the spreadsheet. So Patrick, if you're available, would you be willing to just walk us through that spreadsheet, maybe that summary or whatever you like, so that all the board members are up to speed? I think this can be done in public session as well. I don't think there's anything confidential about this. So.
Absolutely, Tim. I will share my screen. As Tim mentioned, we did an analysis on this. I will say, as we kind of walk through these processes, we'd always made the assumption that we were going to be taking these funds at their net present value and applying them against our CTP payment. That was an assumption that was made. We'd never want to assume anything. So I did various forms of analysis, and these are our choices. We have a choice to take the net present value discounted at Tri-State's weighted average cost of capital and apply that against our buyout or our refinancing payment. Or we could continue to receive retirement cash payments from Tri-State as we normally do. And what does that imply? Well, what you have here on can everybody see my screen? Can you see my screen okay? Okay, yeah. Great. There's column 1 applies net present value of outstanding Tri-State patronage capital owed to LPEA against this exit. And it's amortized over 20 years at 5.5 interest. That's not to say we're going to do that. That's, just the scenario that for consistency's sake, we are using. The other scenario would be borrowing the full amount. And so when you look at that, there's a huge delta in our cash expense. We would have to finance an additional $47 million in that scenario if we were to not take that net present value. So the actual total cash variance is significant. It's $78 million over the course of a 20-year term. And so when you think of it in those ways, you have the option of, if you were to receive the cash from Tri-State, in theory, you could invest it at a similar rate. And those two choices would be how you would evaluate the cash on that transaction. The cash that you would get from any investment is immediately going to be eaten up by debt service. And then the other piece is, as Tri-State retires patronage capital, they have a choice the same as us, whether they want to retire it or not. And so if you look, what you're looking at here, this was provided by Tri-State. It is our retirement amounts and allocation amounts by years. Right now, the almost $74 million number, that is an estimate. That's not what's currently on our books, because when we received this, it was on March 7th of 2025. Tri-State was still finalizing their books, and this is what they had estimated. This includes their estimation for 2024 PAC cap that they would retire. When I look at the last 10 years of what Tri-State has been paying in cash, it comes to essentially about $1 million on average. If you were to continue to take that based on how they've been retiring in the future, it would take 50 years for them to pay the rest of this cash back at the current 10-year average rate of cash payment. So, and the other pieces, and Tri-State has done a good job of retiring some patronage capital each year. It has reduced as they have had their own cash pressures. There is no guarantee that they have to make this payment. The same as LPEA does not retire patronage capital if it forces additional borrowing. Tri-State has discretion on whether they want to make a cash payment or not. So that is to say that the future cash receipt is not guaranteed either. So with those, doing all this analysis, it's a pretty clear choice that applying the net present value towards the refinance exit is the financially wise choice, at least from a cash management standpoint. Kirsten, I see your hand.
Yeah, and we know from Tri-State, I think from their LTFF, their long-term financial forecast, or maybe it's from their ERP, something about their rates. They are limiting their capital retirement to a fairly small amount. They're trying to always keep it because for the really small co-ops, they need that that equity on their books, or they need that cash. So I think it may be even more, you said 50 years. I think it may be even longer based upon what they're saying they're going to be able to retire. So thank you.
Ted,
Yeah.
I guess you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So Patrick, thanks a lot. And Tim, thanks for bringing this to us. And I would just, I can barely understand this, and I believe what you're saying, and I trust the math, Patrick, but we have a lot of attendees here today, and do you feel like almost the way Rachel asked Graham, can you give us the third grader explanation, or confirm my statement that yes, we are going to get our capital credits from Tri-State, and we're choosing to take them upfront rather than over time for sound financial reasons?
That is the recommendation, Ted, and I will do my best. So we talked about a $71 million, that's approximately $71 million is our current generation and transmission patronage capital. The present value of that is $47,400,000, which you see this is interest expense. That 30 million delta, that's bringing that back. It's essentially from a time value of money perspective. If you invest money in the future, it's worth more. If you're bringing it back, if you're talking about something in the future, you bring it back to what you would have been investing at, right? In simple terms, right? If you're saying I'm looking 20 years in the future, what should that be worth today based on current interest rates? If I was to just go buy a bond that returns 5.5%, I get a yield on that. This is the exact same type of principle. It's just being used towards lowering that contractual refinance amount, that exit amount. So it's really adjusting for the time value of money, and the time value of money is driven on investment returns, right? And that is based on what is, what fancy way would be cost of capital. That's essentially interest expense, and it's got a few things that comprise that interest expense. So you move it forward, you move it backward based on that rate. And I don't know if that probably was not third grade but generally that's probably as good as I could get it.
I might be able to take a attempt at third grade. As we looked at this analysis during FAC and reviewing this great analysis that Patrick did internally, I mean, I would put this in the category of a fairly easy decision. I think it makes total sense for us to take this as a lump sum, given the analysis that we have in front of us. And it also significantly de-risks any future change that might or might not occur with Tri-State's finances. And I think it makes total sense for us to do this as a lump sum to de-risk any future financial variables that we have no control over. So I think this is a pretty straightforward, easy decision based on the analysis that Patrick has done, and would concur with the recommendation from FAC.
I've got another little, maybe I've got my third grade explanation dialed in. It's worth more money to take it as an application. I can't put it in any, after doing the analysis, there's better value towards doing it, and that math flips out.
Joe?
Yeah, so by taking the lump sum, does that reduce the amount of loan? Is it like buying down your loan on a mortgage? Will that be immediately applied towards the loan we're taking out for the CTP?
That's correct. We have, it's obviously not, it's not tied into the actual loan terms. We will negotiate those on our most advantaged basis. But we will, by netting that out, this is what's due to Tri-State. So, and there's a few other components that play into it, but yes, Joe, that's correct.
Okay, so this, I mean, can we say that this, so we're talking about borrowing $220 million. Does it mean now that we're going to be borrowing $150 million?
Approximately 165 as I've modeled when you look at, and then that number is subject to change. We don't want to say that this is a hard and fast number, but 162 million is what is modeled in the numbers that I just showed you. 162, 269,646. I have to qualify though that is not a hard and fast number. It is subject to change. Term, interest rate, and also the actual finance amount still has some variables that are being determined.
Okay, so over 20 years, like it says there, we're basically saving $78 million if we get the loan at 5.5%, correct?
You'd be saving 30 million in interest, right? Okay. The principal is just payback, so saving wouldn't be an appropriate way to say that, but yeah, you would be saving approximately 31 million.
Okay, thank you.
Nicole?
So one question that came up by a member in the Pagosa Sun was that, or a statement they made was that by taking this discounted patronage, we would be forfeiting members' right to the full amount of G&T capital they're owed. And my understanding that's not correct. We're still liable for the full amount that our members are owed. And I just wanted to, that was some misinformation out there that I wanted to clear up.
Yes,
that is absolutely true.
Yeah, the G&T capital has already been allocated on our books in accordance with our bylaws, and we are still, LPEA is still obligated to retire that to our members in accordance with our own bylaws.
Thank you.
John?
A question I get is, by us taking this capital credits, what is the effect to us returning those capital credits to members? We're saving $30 million, but typically that's part of a package that comes in. We operate with some of it. If it leaves us with those funds, how do we then get that to people who 20 years ago were paying those rates and contributing to it?
We'll have to return that via margins. So we will, and what do I mean by that? So margins are that's what generates positive cash flow for us. So we're going to have to generate cash to pay those down in the future.
So a member's anticipated capital credits, if Tri-State is paying us $1 million of this possible on your spreadsheet $13 million.
So how it works, John, is Tri-State will pay us, say they retire on average $1.1 million. That's cash that we receive that we then can repurpose how we see fit. It goes into our general cash position. We could use it for capital expenditure. We could use it to pay down LPEA patronage capital, or most often we use it to pay down G&T patronage capital that is coming due. What we will have to finance that via LPEA's cash position in the future, because this cash is being foregone. It's reducing that loan amount, so it will have to be funded with LPEA cash in the future.
So the likelihood of those continued pass-through patronage capitals to members still stands.
Yeah,
Even
we
though
still have to. We still have
the
to
net
pay.
present what's that?
We still have to pay it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
I would
members
just-
balance gets reduced as part of this.
I would say that
No
in
LPEA
that
members.
sense, nothing changes. We do this every year anyway. We look at our cash position from various sources and make a decision how much both of the G&T and our own margins that have been allocated we're going to pay. And so it's business as usual. It's just that we will save a lot in interest, and we will not have quite as much from from Tri-State, which is somewhat uncertain anyway. So from a third grader standpoint, I would say a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and that's about as good as you could get, I think, at this point. Kirsten?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, Nicole's question that she passed on from the Pagosa Sun, and John's question is a good reminder that every year we do go through this, Tim, and every year we all need to be reminded about, okay, this is an allocation, this is a retirement. And if we struggle with it, we know that our members struggle with it too. So I really appreciate this discussion of back when Tri-State said, okay, LPEA, we owe you this money. At that time, we went to each member at that time and said, okay, member, we owe you this money. And eventually we're going to pay that off, because the co-op model says, instead of borrowing money, we're going to hold your money for a little bit, and then we're going to pay it back. So we've been paying this money back. Those allocations do not change, to y'all's point. They do not change. And the retirement will happen when the retirement happens. So in 2025, there will still be a Tri-State allocation that we will still be going to members. In 2026, there will only be 4 months worth of allocation. And then that's gone, and we will no longer see allocations. There won't be a 2027 G&T allocation. So I don't know if I just confused it or not, but we struggle with these, you guys. So we should not be at all surprised that all our members struggle with it too, because I have to be reminded every time. Thank you.
John Lee?
Yeah, to that point, I feel like this is a very strong public comment conversation to have, because members are concerned with rate increases and patronage capital being erased. And if it weren't for classes that we've been through, that I've been through, to have enough of a basis to what is our thing, we're wanting third grade. I was so going to go for 8th grade, but you know, for us to have an understanding is the paramount piece. And so in public session, to have this discussion so somebody can go back and take a look at and say, okay, well, back in 2004, I was contributing and rates were this, and I have something to, I think is a great frame up for them, because to Kirsten's point, every year we have to reread, or I look at my notes from the class to understand what are we making sure that we give back to people. I'm a USAA member and for insurance, and they have a sheet that they give you on what that looks like. And those held dollars that are in earnest, represent something as you continue on or you close out your estate. And so I really appreciate this extra time here as we have things going up and coming down to get to the understanding. Thank you.
Anyone else? I agree with your comment, John. This is really great discussion, and it's worth having as often as we need to help ourselves and our members understand. The co-op difference is that that's the members' money. It's not some shareholder that takes it, in a large proportion. This is our co-op difference, and it's important that we all understand and continue to inform our members to the extent possible. So the committee has a motion on the floor. I mentioned that before. Comes out of committee, didn't need a second. I think we've had a lot of discussion here. If there's any more discussion, please speak up. Otherwise, I think we should go for a vote. And any more discussion? All right, so I would say all in favor to approve resolution 2025-04. Please raise your hand and say aye.
And could you keep your hands up just for a second?
Aye.
Okay.
Is anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain? All right, it's unanimous. Ted, I think it's back to you at this point, unless anyone has questions on the FAC report.
It looks like Kirsten's still,
Kirsten, yeah.
Yeah, I sure do. On that report, one of the things that you talk about is there was a discussion on the comments received regarding rate change. Chris and Amanda, can you tell me, do we respond to those individually? How are we dealing with those? I read them. There's an awful lot of them, and I really appreciated our members taking that time. Can you tell me what we do with that information?
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I'm having some connectivity. So we've responded to about 75% of them as of this morning. And so I'm not sure how to answer the second part of your question on what do we do with them.
Well,
so we've responded directly.
Yeah. Have we classified them into, okay, 50%, hate us, 50% love us. I meant 60% love us, 40% hate us. Concerns about, one of the things that I saw was tariffs, which got mentioned before. Tariff is a term that we use, but it's not a term that members are used to hearing. So they associate it perhaps with the new administration, whereas we take it as a schedule of rates. So do you have any numbers for us that we can feed back to our members so they know, oh, my voice was heard. And I heard some other people had my same voice, or wow, I was the lone wolf out there. Anything along those lines, Amanda?
You bet. So I would say that there were a lot of overlapping themes between questions. And so we did not poll a quantitative analysis because of the majority of overlap of themes. But 4 of the key themes that we did hear from our members were opposition to the rate increase in general. In addition to that, concerns about the tri-state departure related or not to the rate increase. The third piece was transparency. And the fourth was, as Chris mentioned earlier, executive compensation concerns.
Yeah, and we have approximately 100 comments that came in over the 30-day period. As Amanda said, the ones that had a clear thing to respond to, we have responded to them as of this morning. And those were some of the themes that came from those 100 different comments. So and the board members have a full compilation and verbatims available for your review for this meeting.
And Chris, And sorry to interrupt, Kirsten, I would just like to add that what you all have, what the board has access to includes comments that came through digitally over the phone and also via mail.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that we've corralled each type.
All of them.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that summary. I also want to thank each and every member who took the time to respond to those, because that's really helpful information to us. We can't always change because of one person saying something, but it really helps us to know what the issues are. Thank you.
Any other comments on the FAC? Rachel?
So it's maybe a sub note in reading through all those comments. I noticed a lot about seniors and fixed income, and just found myself thinking about that as maybe if that's a special demographic to look into as we explore rates, or I don't know. I was just thinking about in my job, right? When we work with different demographic groups, we respond with programming or services in a certain way based on learning needs or styles or what have you. And just found myself wondering if like the senior centers are like hosting a town hall, a senior center, and or CSR specifically prepared to help with, I don't know, just thinking through some of those things, connecting folks with the resources at FERC, or yeah, just thought
I might
about
step in quickly as parliamentarian, just that we do have the approval of the rate tariff as its own agenda item
Oh, sorry.
coming up shortly on the agenda. It might be, it seems like some of these comments are trending more towards that agenda item rather than the Finance and Audit Committee report.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. I mean, I thought this was just going to roll perfectly into that. So, I mean, but I appreciate you sort of pointing out that segregation. You know, the questions that Tim was fielding were because it was part of the FAC report that there was a review of those member comments. But I think it also does apply quite nicely to any discussion that we might have in agenda item 5C about the final approval of the rate tariff. So I guess maybe if there aren't any other specifically FAC comments, then we'll jump into the 5C and talk about approval of the rate tariff, where we can have more discussion about this if there is any that's desired. So anything else for FAC?
Yeah, just a comment on that. The FAC asked for this information to understand if there were a sort of consistency or a large block of comments that were specific to the structure of the rate rather than just overall comments, right? And in looking at that at the FAC, it did not seem there were consistent themes around the structure. If there had been, FAC may have taken some recommendation about changing that structure, but we did not have. So the FAC is not making any recommendation on what is the structure that was published. So that's all I have. And if there's no other comments, yeah, then let's move on. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Tim. Good. Thanks for bringing that clarity out of FAC. So yeah, then let's go ahead and move on to 5C, which is final approval of 2025 rate tariff. You know, obviously that has been posted and has now been posted and comments received, and we're in a position to now take action on that. As we move into that, probably best to get a motion on the table before we start having discussion about how we're going to vote on that. So Kohler, I see your hand.
So I'll go ahead and make that motion, and then I do have a comment once it's seconded, if it gets seconded.
Okay, thank you, Kohler. Do we have a second for the motion to approve resolution 2025-05? Tim's got a second on that, and then I'll go back to Kohler for the first comment.
So one of the things I saw through those comments, and also with talking to members, is the misunderstanding of the word tariff. And I think it is important for us to put that out there, because they're tying this into the federal government tariffs, as what was mentioned. And it's really bothering them, you know, on how this tariff is tied into the federal tariff. So I do think there needs to be an explanation on the work tariff, either on the website or some other way, so that members get an understanding, because they just aren't familiar with it, and it actually took me completely by surprise. I didn't tie the two together at all until I read some of their comments. So my suggestion is we put out some information, be pretty informative, so that they can understand the difference, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Kohler. Agreed by me, certainly, that was a surprising kind of misunderstanding, and kind of it really threw people for a loop. And in all honesty, I think some people may have thought that it indicated some actual dishonesty in the way we were portraying the rate changes. So I do think it's pretty important to clarify that. Other discussion on the motion on the floor. Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you. So we had a special meeting on this on February 14th, which was also the day that we had the major power outage over here in Pagosa. I'm glad, Chris, you were only out for a little bit. We were out for 14 hours over here. And unfortunately, also my Wi-Fi, my internet was down. So I was doing this all by cell. So I wasn't able to ask for as many scenarios as I would have liked. So the process is that there was a cost of service study, and there were recommendations from that cost of service study. We consider that, we say, okay, we know we need to raise this much money. We need to look to see how do we do this without rate shock. And we had decided that, okay, we don't want any one rate, any one tariff to be go up more than 10%. And but overall, the average is going to be 7 point whatever percent it was. Since that was approved at that, not it's approved, since it was recommended at that special meeting, I've had a chance to go back, and keeping in mind that this is very much an art, and that we are trying to, as much as possible, link cost to rates, and knowing that in general, all our fixed costs are not being captured under our fixed rate. We end up capturing it under energy costs, because right now that's kind of the only place we can do it without just shocking the heck out of everybody. So this rate has a 6.7 average increase on the residential, which is our largest class. And I would like to propose an amendment to this to change the formulation of the rate. We still make the same amount of money. We're still meeting our money responsibilities, to change it to what I'm going to call scenario 2. I had asked for a couple of different scenarios where we end up with a desired change to the general service, which is our residential, of 6.5% instead of 6.7%. That does mean that the base rate will change. And what we know from some studies is that the base rate changing and not the energy rate can help folks who are challenged by not being able to control when they turn off and on their lights. So they do it during the peak time, not being able to control that they can put putty on their windows because their people who they rent from won't allow them, not being able to afford some of the energy efficiency that I'm able to afford, and many people are, but those folks who can't really get punished when we charge more energy. So I'm asking that we do a proposed rate, this is a proposed base charge of $33.69 for the general service, a peak charge of $3.27, and an energy charge of $0.1156, which results in a desired change of 6.5%. It does increase the time of use charges. It still is cheaper to use time of use for those who do have control over their things. But so I know that's a long amendment. So my amendment, my requested amendment is to change the general service rate to $33.69 for base charge, the peak charge to $3.27, the energy charge to $0.1156, and then any of the fallout that comes out of that in order to still make our load. That's my amendment.
So we have a motion to amend. Do we have a second?
I'll second that to open up discussion.
So now we have a subsidiary motion. What is open for debate is the amendment as proposed by Kirsten.
Tim, you're next in line.
Yeah, two things. One is that I do not agree with this. I think we put a lot of analysis and we had a lot of discussion, both at FAC and in a special board meeting. And this was, there's lots of trade-offs, as we know, and there are lots, you pull one thread and other pieces move as well, right? And in that discussion, the idea of in one large increase to the base charge in one sort of fell swoop, that would have a significant impact. It'd be a very significant change for a lot of people. And over the years that I have been on this board, and even prior to being on this board, I have seen where that change has created more difficulty in understanding and more consternation for members than any other change, including the peak power charge. I do not agree that this is the right thing to do. And I think if we want to move to that direction, we do it as we have been, which is incrementally over time. It is, and we again, we had this discussion, we've been through it, we've discussed it and analyzed it. And if we really want to go there today, then I suggest you bring up the spreadsheet and we take a look at it and we start all over again, which, and so we include not just your motion, but see the visual impact on that. But I hope we don't go there. I think I hope we vote this down and move on to approve the tariff that we published and which has deep analysis on it. So thank you.
Kohler, you're up next.
So I agree with what Tim said. And Kirsten, I am in agreement with you in that I would like to see that our rates cover where the causation is caused. But at this point in time, I mean, we have spent years, and I have done this personally with myself as well as members, of really pushing on how you can save yourself, on your bill by doing certain efficiency things. And that's been a big push from LPEA itself as far as time of use and other things to get the members to help themselves out and also send a message. And to me, if we increase that base charge in one big chunk like what is being proposed, without countering that with communications and connections with our members, I think it's a slap in the face. And for those of you that were around when Tri-State went to an energy only charge, and it wiped out the ability for people to kind of help themselves on their efficiency, that was a tough battle to deal with. So I am against that, even though I would like to work on it, and from both a mathematical way to get that back up to where it should be, but also from a way to connect with our members so we don't slap them in the face. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kohler. On to Nicole.
I'll be brief because I think some of it's already been said. Kirsten, thank you for bringing this to the forefront, because I realize that most of these discussions, while they've been robust, have been in executive session.
Yep.
So we're having this little high-level philosophical discussion about rate design, I think is a very appropriate place to do it here. And one of the misconceptions a lot of people seem to have is that increasing base charge would have a disproportionate impact on our low-income members, where in fact, what we can tell anecdotally with all of our data is that that's regressive, and that our low-income members would actually benefit from a higher base charge and a lower cost of energy. So And also in general that we've had to build out this whole system for a lot of people who don't actually consume much energy. So thinking second homeowners that, you know, have a fairly large load profile that hardly ever actually buy all the energy we have to have on hand for them. So increasing the base charge would accommodate or mitigate some of that risk we've taken on. So I very much agree with the idea of where you're going, and I've pushed for it the last 2 years where we increased the base charge 7% last year. We're doing it 10% this year. And one thing I've really taken from the member comments is that a lot of people who are on tight budgets plan very carefully for expenses coming forward. And so in kind of like what Tim was saying, and I guess Kohler as well, it's making major changes in that is really disruptive if you have a very strong planning mechanism for how you're going to pay for your non-negotiable expenses in life. So that's where I appreciate where we're going with this, Kirsten. I just don't think I could vote for your amendment because it's too drastic right now. But, you know, it is a stated priority for me to continue, you know, every year that we look at this, which we've talked about doing much more frequent cost of study analysis, that we would continue to move that in that direction.
Thanks a lot, Nicole, for the input. And Kirsten, you're next in
Yeah,
line.
super. Yeah, I appreciate the discussion, and you make a good point. Most of our discussions, if not all, about the rate change were done in executive session, and it is a science and it is an art. Dan, would you please share Kirsten's scenario 2 so we can just talk for about a minute? I fully am expecting that this amendment is going to fail, but I want to show that there is play, that we do look at this stuff, that the staff looks at this. And again, I'm really sorry that I was not able to fully participate in that special meeting, but I was really hamstrung by technology that day. So, and Dan, if you would, I just want you to show the slide that has the sine curve of thank you for sharing.
Can you see that now?
No, not yet.
It's
Start screen.
It's evidently trying. I've had an issue here lately with that coming up in a reasonable time, but it will come up here eventually. Sorry for the delay here.
Well, while you're bringing it up, I see Rachel's hand is up.
Sure, yeah, yielding to Rachel.
Yes, I yield my time.
Sounds good. I'm actually staring at all the curves and the charts here to print them out to look at them side by side. But yeah, again, similarly want to echo the comments made. And I think one thing that I really appreciate about this part of the discussion is while we had a really in-depth dive on the 14th, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to know what the alternatives are or could look like without really looking at them and being able to see them and study them, which is kind of how I process this detailed level of information. So I appreciate just the last month or whenever you sent this email and whenever we got these charts to be able to look at things. And similarly, I agree, like we have been and need to continue to move our cost centers to the charges, like in the rate design. Where's the cost coming from? That's where it goes. And I 100%, that is true. People who are struggling do not have the leisure or the privilege to be able to invest in expensive equipment or not do the laundry in the 1 hour that they're not for their 3 jobs. And so that is a very large part of addressing an energy burden, is acknowledging that working around timing cues is not helpful. I similarly know just how complex and how much time went into this and how it is associated with the cost of service study. And so, as Dan said, we're not aiming for the bullseye. We're doing the best we can.
Great,
and
great.
I trust what they've got. So similarly, I don't think I'll be able to support this at this moment. But I really do appreciate what this did to the peak power charge. And I am quite concerned about peak power charge and how we work with people around that. because it is high in some of these
Yeah.
classes.
Are you seeing the screen now?
Yes, sir, I am.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So part of this, a lot of the time that was spent on this was you developing this tool for us. And it was so that at the special meeting, we could say, well, what would happen if we did it this way? Or could we do that? Because what you have to do is balance everything. You always have to make sure we're making our money, that we're not doing anybody over 10%, that we're, I mean, there's your criteria. And again, I regret I wasn't able to ask for these changes until the next week, and then I was able to see it, and the board's had this for a couple of weeks now. So none of this is a surprise. My concern is that peak charge can be so volatile for an individual member. You blow one evening a month, and you've tripled effectively your base. You've tripled your peak charge. So it doesn't matter how much electricity you buy, you've got a big hunk there. So trying to limit that is very important to me. And we will go through this again and again and again. And every year we bring this up. And every year we get a little bit better. My concern is, we're talking about it may be 50 years before we get this to the right thing. At some point we need to say, you know what? Yes, people are going to be unhappy, but it's better. It's better, and we need to do it. One more. So thank you so much for Dan, for you bringing that up. This is also to kind of show that we do have to pay attention to everything, and how many people are being affected by this, and how much are they being affected. So folks who get 0 kilowatts from us, they have a big kick in this, 46.5%. And it's because they don't buy any electricity. All they have is the base charge. In the meantime, we're still not collecting enough base charge from them, because we still have to get wires all the way to their house that we are not energizing. But we have to get it to them in case we have to energize them when whatever their system is that they're running happens. So thank you for bringing that up, Dan. I'm going to yield the floor, and then I want it back one more time. Thank you.
You want me to close this
down? Oh
yeah,
thanks a lot, Dan. We can see our lovely faces instead of the chart. Thought it was helpful.
All right, kick it over to John Lee.
I thought that this discussion was good, and once again, I think it's great to have in public session. I had more time when Dan produced the graph on Kirsten's bequest 3 weeks ago. I had a great opportunity to dive into it and feel or look at some of the pain, and run it past a couple people who have a different bill set than I do, because I can run it across my own pretty straightforward. But I thought it was great to ask the question. And in the 5 years that I've been on the board, we have been trying to incrementally move things, and it's still off a little bit. So it is a shock, but I don't know, when does bad news get better on that? So I think it's great that we had this additional discussion. I didn't realize that Kirsten brought it up because of her technical difficulties during the last board meeting, but to have it in public session is very good, and I can see the validity in it. Thank you for bringing the questions up, and Dan, thanks for supporting it and giving me 3 weeks to digest it.
Yeah, that's a great tool, Dan. It's so helpful, and I don't want to underemphasize just how important that is. And because it's all the balancing, it helps us with the art, and it helps us with the science, and we do need both. Before I call for the vote, because I know you guys are tired about hearing this, I do want to mention something that you had said, John. You said you're a USAA member. I am too. Thank you very much. And we do get our dividends, and we do find out that is one of the things that I got this year, because I am a certain age, was my senior dividend. And I hadn't gotten a senior dividend before. And I know we can't, there's only so much we can do in rates, But as we start thinking about, well, what programs can we have that might help some of our at-need people? What programs do we have that might help our seniors? Blah, blah, blah. Something to think about is you can't solve this in rates. You might need some other programs. I wouldn't mind having a senior dividend. Might not be possible, but I wouldn't mind. So I would like to call a vote on my request for an amendment.
Kirsten, if you call, not to.
Okay,
not to
sorry.
tell you
I
what to
want
do,
to
but
officially, oh yeah, I'll shut up.
I don't think there's any more discussion on the amendment, so we could proceed to a vote, but I won't cut off discussion. Let me know if there's any more before we vote on the amendment. Okay, seeing none. All in favor of Kirsten's amendment to the tariff design, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, I see Kirsten and John Lee.
Okay, and then all opposed.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
Any abstentions?
And Dan Huntington
is
abstention.
abstaining. Okay,
Yep.
got it. All right, so the motion for that amendment does not pass. Back to the motion on the floor, which is to accept the tariff as written, as distributed to the public. Any more discussion before we go to vote on the actual tariff design? Joe Lewandowski.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank all the people who submitted comments. I guess what was enlightening to me is, first of all, misinformation, and then really, I mean, this stuff is hard for most members and a lot of us board members to fully understand. And I guess maybe it would be a great idea to look at all of these, for our next go around and say, how can we present this information earlier better so that people know exactly what we're asking for and help them pose the questions that they need to ask. Thanks.
Okay, Joe, I don't want to be the bad guy here, but sometimes it's my job, right? We have a motion on the floor and we're arguing for or against that motion. So it's not really the most appropriate place to have commentary outside of, am I for this or am I against it and why? So with that little chiding, I'm sorry, I'll move it over to Tim, and don't take that as directed at all towards you, Tim.
That's all right if you want to direct it towards me. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge the member comments that, and also the hard work the staff put in, and also the board to get to the point where we have this. This is, I'm for it, only because of, not because I want to raise rates on members or have electricity costs anymore, but because we have to pay our bills, and our whole business model in terms of, as we talked about before, the member capital credits arise from our ability to have a margin, an operating margin going forward. And it's clear that we are not going to do that very well, or it will be severely reduced if we do not have this increase. It's been 5 years, really, since we've had any increase that went towards our distribution system. That's a long time, and there's been huge inflation in that time. And I feel that we have a fiduciary duty to approve this in order to make sure that the co-op is on sound financial footing. So thank you. I will vote for it.
Thanks, Tim. And Dan Huntington.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm in agreement with Kirsten on, we need to get that base rate up there to cover our costs. And that's the reason I abstained on that vote. But I'm in favor of this because if we make any major changes, we're going to have to go back to our 30-day advertisement, put this out again to our members, and go through that process again. And I think we've done the best thing we can do to cover our costs and keep us on solid financial footing. And so I don't agree with some of the allocations, but I'm going to vote for it.
Thanks for that, Dan. All right, last call for discussion on the motion. Okay, then, all in favor of approval of the 2025 published rate tariff, raise your hand and say aye, and please keep them up so we can count.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstentions? Okay, I saw that as unanimous, Graham.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. We are at 11:35. We have something like 5 minutes before we get to attorney update. Graham, would I be correct in assuming that we're getting Matt on today?
Sorry, you get me. Matt,
no, don't be
Matt
sorry,
is out of
Graham.
the country.
Yeah.
He's given me his talking points, so
No, that's fine. You've just sort of bailed me out a little bit on agenda. So now we are actually forced with a decision. We have one more agenda item, 5D, that is in board action, but we're sort of up against a break time and a moving into attorney update and executive session. So I guess I'll make the proposal that we take a break and we come back to 5D and finish that. And so we can actually get all the way through board action agenda, and that'll push us a little behind on attorney update and then moving into executive session.
I second that motion.
Well, okay, so we'll consider that moved and seconded. All in favor of that agenda modification, raise your hand and say aye. Any opposed to that agenda modification? It's easy to get votes when people need a break, man. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We'll take a 10-minute break and try and be back here at 11:47, and we'll pick up with 5D. Okay, rolling back into agenda item 5D, policy 112, procedures for introducing bylaw amendments and consideration of proposed bylaw amendments. Let me give some background on this. This is on our agenda today because Director Huntington, Dan Huntington, brought to the attention of the board a list of proposed bylaw amendments, and we need to decide how to proceed with those. Let me set some background and expectations here. As soon as I was aware of these, I contacted staff to get the timeline we have in front of us for the potential of getting things on the ballot that we obviously have coming up with director elections, and those ballots go to print this afternoon, literally at 4 p.m. this afternoon. So I think it's important to realize that to set those expectations that I don't see a feasible path for getting bylaw amendment suggestions that we're just receiving onto this current ballot. So, not that I have the final say in that, but that's the way I see us, the possibilities for proceeding. However, I do think that we still need to decide how best to address these proposals. And I think we have, both our bylaws and policy 112 address specifically how bylaw amendments can be introduced for a vote by the membership. And really it segregates that into two different categories. One is bylaw amendments suggested by members, and the other is bylaw amendments brought up by the board of directors. It would appear to me, and I'm happy to take input, especially from Dan Huntington, because he presented this, that these are bylaw amendments that are suggested by members. If that is the case, we have two methodologies spelled out for member proposed bylaws, one of which is a petition that's circulated and signed by 10% of the membership, and the other is that bylaw amendment can be proposed by a member and presented at the public input section of a regular scheduled meeting, and then considered by the board for either acceptance, modification, or rejection at a subsequent meeting. So I guess at this point, that's my background presentation, and I would lean on Dan at this point to clarify what you think, how you think we should proceed. What is this a proceeding from the board standpoint or proceeding from the membership standpoint?
There's a group of members presented these bylaws to me, and we knew time was running out for them to present them to our previous board meeting. So I went ahead and presented them, and I told Ted I had them coming, and Ted asked for a copy of them, so I presented them to him. And I assumed, and Patrick, your assumption statement comes into effect. You never assumed anything. I assumed Ted would go ahead and put them in the on board for us. So anyway, yeah, time is short, and they didn't get them to me or themselves present them in a timely manner. So that's where I'm at. I think the board needs to maybe acknowledge some of these. I don't agree with all of them, but I think there's some of them that should be in the bylaws rather than in policy, to maybe make clarifications and can't be changed on a whim by the board. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, any other input on how we proceed here? I think I appreciate that comment, Dan. I mean, yeah, obviously, you know, from my opinion, we can't get this on the ballot, but I think there are some valid, you know, this is valid member comment for sure. There's some stuff in those. You know, they're not well baked, I would suggest. Like, they need work, they need consideration. I mean, among other things, they probably need, you know, pretty serious legal review to make sure that we're, you know, dotting those I's and crossing those T's. And so I think, you know, that we could have a process here that would allow that to happen. I guess also carrying on with your point, I think it's very important to, you know, to point out that we very much appreciate and respect the effort that goes into this from the membership to consider where we have room for improvement, where they particularly as members might see concerns and problems. So fully recognizing that and wanting to respect that by putting it through sort of a rigorous process and getting the board involved in this in addition to the members. And so, you know, perhaps you know, having a board process here might be the right direction to go, but I will, you know, I'll open the floor a little bit if board members have suggestions about where we go with this. I do see Tim's hand up.
Ted, thank you. It seems to me that, yeah, these are from the members and they need to be considered by the board in a proper manner. Doesn't seem like it doesn't fit with our policy at the moment and the timing in our bylaws to be considered in this annual meeting, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't look at them. And I have sort of 2 points on that regard. One is, it seems to me that these could be considered initially by the Committee on Policies over the next year. Maybe there are policy changes that could address them before we go to amendment changes. And it would also be an already standing committee that might be able to then make recommendations as to whether they are should be bylaw changes or policy changes or any other kind of recommendation. And we have a vehicle, it seems like. I think one other point that I would make is that it would be best if the members who are proposing each of these identify themselves, because otherwise we have to go back through Dan to, I guess, convey whatever response we come up with to each and every one of them. It's also a little odd, in my opinion, that several of them are about transparency, but it's not transparent as to who submitted them. So it would be useful to maybe ask Dan Huntington whether that's a possibility or not. If not, then he becomes the vehicle. And if it takes longer than this election, we would be relying on Dan as just a member, not as a board member, to do so. That's my 2 points and a suggestion. Thank you.
Any other comments or suggestions? I mean, so I'll go ahead and make a motion then that we send these suggestions to the Committee on Policy for review and recommendation back to the board with the extra criteria that should be done in a timely enough fashion that they could be considered before our next annual meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Joe Lewandowski.
Before our next annual meeting, are you talking about our next annual meeting is in a month and a half from now?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the clarification, Joe. I think as I made it clear before, although my motion language wasn't clear enough, that I don't see any way to get it on this annual meeting. So when I say that, I mean that the Committee on Policies should bring it back in a timely enough fashion that it can be considered for our, I'll just say, 2026 annual meeting. Rachel.
Well, I think one thing, Dan, as Dan, you brought forward, like one of the reasons it's going through this mechanism as a set of member bylaws versus the normal mechanism, the outline mechanism of the policy was the time constraint. Like it sounded like the hope was to really get it on in this year's annual meeting. And what I'm hearing is that's just not possible. And then I also heard it would be really helpful to know what members are bringing this forward for lots of reasons, including if there's clarification, like, hey, what's your intent here, so we can work around it. So rather than coming up with this kind of workaround, given that the time pressure is off, could we just ask the members who presented this if they would work through our existing process that we have to come present it? And then it'll end up in the same place, but it's just like where it's being discussed and vetted at Committee on Policies, but it's helping just keep things in the standards so we're not creating a precedent. And also it's really giving the members who are bringing this forward the chance to speak to what they're hoping to see and for us to get some more context.
So I guess what I heard was essentially an argument against the motion to send it to Committee on Policies. Thanks. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm confused because it seems like we're really, Dan brought these forward. But for members to bring forward a bylaw amendment, it's my understanding, and correct me, Graham, if I'm wrong, that they need to get 4,000 signatures. And then even after that, the proposal goes to the board for discussion. This seems to be kind of an end run brought up at the 11th hour to move something that a few members are asking for. So I'm having a real problem with process and the appropriateness of how we're going about voting on this. And as a member of the policy committee, I mean, everybody knows how long it takes to get through policies. We would basically have to put everything else aside to get through these and assemble language and make sure it passed the legal smell test, etc. So I'm not saying I'm going to vote against this right now, but I'm having a real difficult time digesting this.
Graham, would you, yeah, it sounds like you're kind of ready to comment on that, like the clarity that Joe's asking for about in fact, more than one methodology by which a member of LPEA can propose a bylaw amendment.
Yeah, so as Rachel sort of put the policy on the screen there, policy 112 on the screen there for a second, there's two ways that a member can propose a bylaw. One, they can, according to the policy 112, they can appear at the public comment section of the agenda. So if it had happened that according to the policy, this time it would have been one of our members speaking and presenting during the public comment period, then we would put it on the agenda for the April meeting. As we've all sort of identified, that would be definitely too late to get it on this current annual meeting ballot. But that is one way to get it in front of the board. And then what it would be and then the board has the opportunity to evaluate it, decide if they want to, they want to propose it effectively as like a board amendment. Board says, oh, member, that's a great idea, we should do this. And the board then puts it on the ballot, or the board could modify it and put it on the ballot, or the board could say, we don't like that idea, we're not going to put it on the ballot. And so then the other option is the petition, right, which basically removes the necessity of the board's stamp of approval, right? So if there's sufficient signatures on the petition, the members can get it directly onto the ballot without needing any sort of board approval, right? And where we are today is basically because members are able to communicate directly with their representatives on the board. These members have brought these to Director Huntington, who has proposed them as a director rather than a member, as it were. So they're, at least I feel like this is something we can look at here today, and if we decide that you want to refer these to the Committee on Policies for further evaluation, I think that's well within your scope of flexibility. This kind of goes back to Kirsten's questions about policy 101 and sort of the ability to have some inherent flexibility in our policies. This, how we got here today, doesn't exactly 100% line up with policy 112, but if we want to kind of keep things moving, the board has some flexibility to sort of say, well, we're going to consider this received at the board level through Director Huntington, and then we're going to proceed accordingly.
Thanks, Graham, for providing that policy and bylaw clarity. Dan, you're up next.
Yeah, I think going ahead and putting these in the hands of the Committee on Policies, refine them, basically keep the total intent of them, would satisfy the members that they are being considered. And if they want to get them bylaw changes, they can call for a special meeting sometime in the meantime before the 26th annual meeting. So I'm proposing let's put them in the hands of the Committee on Policies and work them, refine them, work them out.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Over to you again, Rachel.
That works great. It was helpful to hear Graham's litany. I guess this is actually a question back at Dan, so hopefully everyone in line can understand this. Dan, will the members be willing to, do you think you can get their names or contact? I think that's a procedural concern, but a valid one. If you're not on the board and this takes longer, there's no thread to follow back if someone's unable to understand something or has a follow-up question. So I think it's a legit request.
Right. No, it's no problem. They can.
Okay, awesome. Then I support going through committee of policies also.
Thanks, Rachel. And Kirsten, you're next.
Yes, thank you. Rachel, you had up the pertinent part about if they present it during the comment section. Could you put that up, or could somebody put that up again? The reason I'm asking is sometimes during that part, we read letters from our members. Like if they're not able to attend, we read letters from our members. So if I was to interpret Dan's sending us these questions in the last several days as a member comment, then we have guidelines about what we do with member comments that are or proposed, which is that the board will hear them. It'll get scheduled on the next board meeting. Is that what that says?
Yes.
Sorry, you're okay. So if that's what that says, you're then if we do that, they're not going to be all cleaned up and everything, but they should be addressed at the next board meeting. And at that point, we'll probably have to say, gosh, we need to do some work on this. But what this policy says is it ends up at the next board meeting. Initiated to comply. Where's this one? A member may propose by requesting during the member comment section, the member must submit a written amendment to the board at the meeting. So we've got the written amendment. So I think following the spirit, if not exactly the letter of it, we're better off placing the amendment in the wait, schedule of that the board placed the amendment in the notice of annual meeting. I thought it said it has to go to it has to be noticed on the next board.
It does right there.
Okay, super.
B2.
Thank you. Okay. So B2 is I think we need to do that. As it says we're going to do that. We should do that. I anticipate that we're going to learn a lot in that month, and being on the committee on policy, I can personally say I'm willing to do more than our 2 hours of normal committee on policy in order to try to get through it. There's no way in heck we can get through all of them, but it's supposed to be to the board next month. We should put it to the board next month, and then we can divide it out from there. As opposed to saying right now, let's go outside the policy, let's send it back to the policy committee. Let's stick by the policy and the spirit of the policy, which is it was proposed via Dan, and so it should be on the agenda next month. That's where, so I am voting against the motion on the table.
Thanks, Kirsten. Joe Lewandowski.
Yeah, I agree with Kirsten. I would vote against this too. And just to go back, if it was referred to the policy committee, I mean, that there would be a presumption there that we agreed that we should write these policies. Yeah, I know that there has to be a vote on them ultimately, but there's a presumption there that we would find these worth our time to spend time on. And my reading of them, I'll have to read them again, got them at the last, at the 11th hour. I can't say that I would agree that we should even spend time on some of these. But I would, again, go back to, I would agree with what Kirsten proposed.
Nicole, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm fine. It sounds like both of my fellow committee on policy members want to take this up. So I think we can adjust the agenda for Monday, committee on policy meetings, and see if we can. I think we probably need more than an hour. So I'll circle back and see if that's possible. But what I didn't understand is Dan was kind of framing it as we'll go clean it up in committee on policies, whereas I would think our objective was to review them and then recommend to the board whether or not they should actually be considered for member voting on, for bylaw change in 26. So I want to make sure I would understand what was expected on the committee on policies review. So I don't know if we need to I'm in favor of just going ahead and reviewing this on Monday. I don't think what we're dealing with is pressing, and I'd like to respond to this. So I don't know, at what point do we, maybe you call for vote for this current motion and then decide if we want to, if we have support to change it, and then if so, what the direction exactly is of what the board wants from the Committee on Policy.
And I was going to amend the motion to that effect, Nicole, which is I amend the motion so that it is that we will redirect this to the Committee on Policies to then who will bring back to the board their recommendations on whether or not these should be considered for forward movement.
And so as the motioner, I would accept that as a friendly amendment, just with the clarity that, you know, my motion said get it done in time for 2026 election. And what I hear, Rachel, as your friendly amendment is consider it on Monday.
Yep.
Correct?
I guess I feel I'm torn because the policy says one thing, but we are in such a different time realm because to Dan's point, it's not going to get in this annual meeting. We can call a special meeting, and it's rushed policy, which could lead to bad policy, is worse than just taking the time needed. So I'm not saying it has to happen on Monday. I'm just saying goes to the COP and then comes back to the board once they've had the chance to review it and give it all the eyeballs for recommendation on action. No time frame attached.
Then I would just argue that that is no different than the motion on the table.
Great. I think all I was doing was answering Nicole's question about what it is they're doing. They're recommending action.
So are you okay with that not being an amendment to the motion, which truly is to send this to Committee on Policy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, onward. Joe?
Yeah, I have two questions, one from Nicole and one for Graham. Nicole, I don't understand what we would be talking about on Monday. Can you explain that?
Sure. So my understanding is we would review each of the bylaw amendments and circle back with either revisions. We would circle it back to the full board to consider our recommendation, which would be the other to, you know, accept these bylaw amendments to be presented to the full membership for a vote in 2026. And I think we look at each one of these amendments as separate amendments. And so we could either recommend that the full board accepts them to put forward, accept as revised, or does not accept. Because that's within our purview of 112, is that we don't, when a board or if a member comes forward and says, hey, I want this bylaw amendment to be voted on by the entire membership, that's within our purview to say, no, we don't agree. So then they would have to go and get 10% of the entire membership signatures in order to get it on the member.
So we would make a decision on Monday on all of these, whether this is going to go to a vote in 2026?
We would make a recommendation for the full board to consider.
And when would it go to the full board then? At the next meeting?
Well, I think I need to talk offline and see how much time we have for this. But it doesn't sound like this amendment is actually putting any time constraints on our turnaround time.
You know, well, I think trying to decide that on Monday is impossible, but I would like to ask Graham, if we push this as Kirsten's suggestion to the next meeting, would the board be making a decision on each of these proposals, yay or nay?
I think to me, it says, as I read the policy, it says it needs to be discussed at the next meeting, which means that could also then be continued into the next meeting after that. I think we fit into, as Rachel stated, rushed policy leads to bad policy. We have, especially with, the inability to meet our printing deadlines for this meeting, with the option, the board could, as has been noted in this debate, could call a special meeting. Like if we felt like, we don't want to wait all the way until the 2026 annual meeting, you could have a vote of this on a special meeting in the interim. There's a lot of flexibility out there. So I think what it sounds to me like we're getting is that we should keep this top of mind. We should keep this in front of the Committee on Policies, and the Committee on Policies should report back at least by next month where it's gone. There should be a discussion at the board level about where it is and about what our kind of better time frame is to get good analysis of these and come to a thoughtful decision on each of them individually.
Okay, well, I would say I think it's going to be impossible, other than an 8-hour meeting on Monday, to get through these things. I see no reason that we shouldn't, again, take Kirsten's suggestion, push it to the next meeting, and go about in a thoughtful manner. These are pretty big questions that they're raising. I think trying to rush anything on this, people complain about lack of transparency, that's all we have here, is basically an opaque process that we have to follow here, that we don't even understand completely. So I really disagree with Nicole's idea that we can take this on Monday. I think we have to push this to the next meeting, discuss it, decide, so we can all look at these, decipher what in fact that they do mean, what the implications are, and then, move on from there. But I think trying to have us as a policy committee, three board members and 2 staff members vote on this, I think is foolhardy.
Okay, let me just, I need to provide some clarity there. That nobody's asking the Committee on Policy to make decisions on this. The Committee on Policy doesn't even have that purview. The Committee on Policy can discuss it and make a recommendation to the board. And as is the case with all recommendations from committees, action doesn't have to be taken on that. So
making a recommendation is that is a decision. We make a recommendation, yay or nay. That's a decision. It's not benign.
All right, I disagree with that, but we can move on.
One quick other clarification, just so we're all on the same page. As I understand it, the proposal or the that's on the table has no time cap. What you propose is just to send it to the Committee on Policies. Is that correct? No time.
No,
bound.
my motion had a time cap of 2026 election.
Thank you.
Kirsten.
Meeting.
Annual meeting.
Yeah, thank you. That's the 2025 annual meeting, which is in 2026. Yes, excellent. So again, I would like to speak against the motion on the table. I do believe we have a policy that covers this, and if we can agree that this was indeed presented as during member comments via Director Dan, then we follow the policy. The policy says it's on the agenda next month. Next month, we have this discussion. What the heck are we going to do with this? In the meantime, the policy committee has a chance to think through, okay, well, what would be a valid amount of time? How do we want to address this? And then, so next month when it's on the agenda, we say, okay, policy committee, have you had a chance to think about it? And we say, sure, we think it's going to be a 6-month process, or we think we can address these 3 things just by tightening up policy, whatever. It's a brief thing. But the policy right now says it should be on the agenda next month. And I would prefer not to break either the intent or the letter or the spirit of that policy, and put it on next month. And then we rehash this discussion again of what the heck do we do with these, because they are important to be done with, but we don't want to rush it. Thank you.
John Witchell.
I'd like to request that we table the motion. If I can give one a brief moment on why. This is a very unusual set of requests, and it was presented in an unusual way, which is not to say it's problematic. This group is just not hasn't had a lot of experience with it. I think that it's not clear that it was properly presented as a member request. It's not clear that what our timeline and what our obligations are in this group, and then it's not clear what our instructions are to the policy on committee, and it's not clear what our choices are. And so what I'd like to ask, if you guys will table the motion with me, that Graham prep a memo to us that give us more clarity on what are we procedurally moving forward correctly? What are our options? What are our obligations? Even Kirsten was, I believe, correctly identifying an assumption that it was presented properly. Without debating the merits of that, I think we need clarity on that. There's just a bunch of sequential things that I just don't think that we're in a good position to call the ball here right now. If Graham gives us a little more clarity in 30 days, I think we'll be in a position to make an informed judgment, not a spot decision now. Therefore, I'm officially requesting that we table the motion.
We need a second. I see, Joe, is that a second? Thank you. Okay, moved and seconded to table. Graham, clarify with me, do we have discussion on a motion to table?
I'm gonna double check that right now.
All right, hang tight then.
Don't uncall the question, but Graham doesn't have that hair because he's a parliamentarian.
Just give him a second. He's just checking.
He's good at this.
Oh, yeah. I know. I'm sorry.
We could take an over under on it.
So
it may not even be a totally real motion, right? Graham, motion to table.
Well, so it'd be, at this point, it sounds like it's a motion to continue to a date certain, right, which would be the next meeting. And and it's been seconded, so I want to just see if there's debate. So here we go. Not debatable. So we need to immediately proceed to.
Okay, so just to make that sure that we're doing it right, I'm revising my motion to is exactly as he said, to a date certain. You okay with that, Joe? Okay.
All right, so revised and reseconded, no discussion. So is anybody unclear on that motion? Then we'll go to vote.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you could just restate the motion where we're at, that'd be great. Thank you.
The motion on the floor is to continue this question to the April meeting.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, so here we are. All in favor of John's motion to continue, say aye. Raise your hand.
I see, wait, let me count. So I have Tim, David, Dan, Holly, John, Joe, and Ted.
Okay. All opposed to John's motion to continue?
I have Kohler, John Lee, Nicole. Is that, and Kirsten? I see your hand, Kirsten.
Any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. I don't remember. I don't know the count, but motion passed. All right. So discussion on these bylaw amendments continued until next meeting. So you'll see it on the agenda for the next meeting. Moving on.
Hang on, just to close it out, and Graham, can we get commitment from you that you'll at least give us a memo or some notes on what our options are here, so we can move this conversation along appropriately.
Absolutely, and sort of to let the board know my thought process on that. Worked with Pat Mangan, who is the Senior Director of Governance Education at NRECA on subjects like this in the past. Pat is an excellent resource. My recollection from working with him in the past is that his services are included in our NRECA membership. So I plan to reach out to him and get some independent third-party expert analysis on this as well. If I could also, just for a second, one thing that came up in the course of these was a note that our individual director expenditures had not been being posted on our website as was required under policy 108. What had happened was we moved to we went back and looked at it, and when we moved to a consent agenda, that is sort of when that stopped happening. So staff has, as of now, this moment, if you go to our website, you will see we have published all of those individual director expense reports back to the date where we had inadvertently stopped publishing them. So for the members that are watching, that has been remedied, and you can go see the last several years director expense reports on our website now. Those are up to date, and thank you for bringing that to our attention and allowing us to remedy that.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so Graham, you're up next. Give us your report and Matt's report. Or your version of Matt's report.
I'm going to give you my version of Matt's report. Right. Sorry, let me pull it up. So, all right. So the three areas that Matt is going to update in public session are one, the sleeving case, which is in front of FERC, two, the formula rate case, which is also in front of FERC, and three, the contract termination payment appeal, which is in front of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. So the sleeving case, as you may recall, relates to sleeving fees for departing members that want to sleeve power purchase agreements through Tri-State, and what is the administrative fee associated with that. As you may recall, we reached an agreement with Tri-State as part of our settlement, so we are merely in a monitor position with that, but settlement is moving forward. But really, we're in a take no position on that, and we're merely monitoring. As for the formula rate case, it's moving forward very slowly in the settlement process, and there's continued discussions amongst the interveners. And he let me know that there is now a March 31st rate case settlement conference, and that in this position, our status is to monitor it. We are not actively litigating in the rate appeal at FERC. And then for the contract termination appeal, Tri-State's appeal is nearly fully briefed, and we continue to engage in the appellate process along with United Power and Mountain Parks. As you may recall, the 10th Circuit has instructed us to file jointly with United Power and Mountain Parks, so we don't independently brief these things. We work collaboratively with them. That is on the instruction of the court. And then as an update, Tri-State filed an appeal that is been consolidated with the contract termination appeal. What happened was in December 5th, FERC issued a compliance order related to the way that Tri-State calculates its the portion of the contract termination payment that is a credit to the departing member for future transmission services. And Tri-State disagreed with that calculation and have appealed that, and the 10th Circuit has consolidated those into the underlying case with the contract termination payment generally. And so we have joined with United and Mountain Parks in response to that order and Tri-State's appeal of that order, and we're still very early in the process of that, but they should all be unified, and ultimately we should receive a unified decision from the 10th Circuit on the contract termination payment issues.
Questions for Matt through Graham before we before we go. Next agenda item is into executive session. So anything about those details that people want to dig into? Fair enough. Thank you, Graham.
Tim, did you have a question?
Oh,
Yeah, so just for the sake of a summary, what I heard you say is essentially there's a lot of action at the 10th Circuit with Tri-State making various appeals that we're responding to that are related to the CTP and its calculation and its ancillary calculations around transmission. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, the primary appeal is, as you all recall, Tri-State submitted a lost revenue approach to calculate the contract termination payment, and FERC adopted a balance sheet approach that is more akin to what United had proposed. And so Tri-State's initial appeal is to try and get that remanded with instructions that FERC issue a lost revenues approach instead of a balance sheet approach, right? And then as part of, once FERC came up with its determination of what the contract termination payment calculation would be, it made Tri-State do indicative calculations under a compliance ruling, and it has disagreed with some of Tri-State's subsequent calculations, one of which was to determine what percentage of the contract termination payment is attributable as a transmission credit. They determined that that calculation, FERC determined that that initial calculation was too small and sent them more specific instructions on how to calculate it, resulted in a larger transmission credit calculation, fairly significantly, about 50% larger than what was initially calculated. And so now Tri-State is appealing that specific inputs of that calculation that result to significant increase in the percentage of the contract termination payment that is attributable to. So the contract termination payment itself doesn't change. It's the portion of it. It's basically, say, instead of a third of it being transmission credit, now closer to half of it is transmission credit. That makes sense.
That's very helpful. Thanks.
okay. Next agenda item is going into executive session. So if I could get someone to make a motion and clarify what quite a few things. So read it and clarify what we're going into executive session for. Tim, I see your hand.
So yeah, I make a motion to go into executive session to, well, it just says.
I can read the list off if you'd like.
Attorney update of FERC and related actions, power supply progress, RFP process review, Mercuria confirmation review, financial performance of employee benefit programs, and consideration of member requests for information or policy 108. I think that's it, right?
Perfect. Yeah. We need a second for that.
Rachel seconds.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to go into executive session. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Or abstentions? All right. Then let's go find your link. We'll exit this meeting, go into executive session, come back to this meeting later. Welcome back from executive session. It appears that we do have a couple of action items resulting from or coming out of executive session. Let's see. And they are so labeled on the agenda 8B and C. So for 8B, Mercuria confirm signing authority. Is there anybody that is ready and willing to make a motion on that action? Tim, go ahead.
So I move that we approve resolution 2025-05, approval of confirmation letter with Mercuria Energy America I don't think there's anything else needed, right? That's sufficient.
No, that's good enough. We just need a second. I'll take Joe as a second. And any discussion before we go to vote on the approval of that resolution? I'll take Kohler.
Yeah, just a quick question, probably for Dan Harms. In the board packet, it's on page 82 of 219 for me. It's those charts, the Exhibit A. And the question I had is it showed that the tri-state firm part that we're getting, the firm shaped PPA. My question is, why isn't that 40 megawatts throughout all the months and all the days, all the hours?
That's intentionally shaped that way, Kohler, to more closely align with our load profile. So they had a given number of megawatt hours as part of a contract that they could give us, and it could have either been a flat 30 across all hours, or, you know, pump it up a little bit during our times of peak and bump it down a little bit, because we don't want to be long during daylight hours and the shoulder seasons. And so with the added solar capacity there, that's why we shaped it that way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Joe Lewandowski.
Yeah, I'm supporting this motion, and the staff has negotiated a very favorable deal for LPEA and its members.
Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor of approving resolution 2025-05, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Do we have any opposed or abstentions? All right, unanimous. Thank you very much. Next,
John is an abstention, right?
He's absent, so.
Yeah, we lost John and we lost Rachel.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they gave me a heads up. John gave us all a heads up. Okay, so now item 8C, possible action related to member request for information under policy 108. Does anybody have a motion prepared for that one?
I'll take a chance.
All right, yeah, go for it, Tim.
So I think the motion is to approve the items that were requested by members under policy 108, written policy 108, as reviewed in the executive session with, yeah, I'm going to stop there. You tell me if I'm wrong there, Graham.
No, that's right.
Okay.
Seems good. We need a second.
Second.
I'll take it, Nicole. Thank you very much. Any discussion on that motion before we go to vote? Seeing none, all in favor of Tim's motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 And any opposed? Abstentions? All right, looks like we got that one passed as well. Moving on to the last section of our agenda, reports. Do you have anything that you need to point out to us, Graham, from the attorney report?
I actually do. I didn't put this on my report this month, but I did go over to Pagosa Springs to meet with the town council, answer their questions about the Trujillo substation, and I'm happy to report that the council has approved all the documentation, and we will get everything signed and finalized this week and begin construction on the Trujillo substation. So sorry, we didn't get the full response from the town council in time to include it in the attorney report, but that is a done deal now.
All right, great. Thank you for the great news. Okay, director reports. Anything anybody wants to point out from their reports, highlight, or any questions that board members have to the directors that presented those reports? I know I've kept you a long time. I see Kirsten's hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I realized the board package was 219 pages, and I apologize for my share of that, kind of. I hope you do have a chance to review it. The tri-state report I think was very informative in including where they're headed as they look at their RFPs and they look at their resource planning. The other four are for the NRCA annual meeting, which the geothermal resolution that Nicole worked so hard on did pass very well with flying colors. And I'd be happy to take any questions on that. Thank you again, Nicole, for that. That was great work. And I'd be happy to take any questions on any of that there. That was probably my briefest report. The CREA meeting, some notes and some pretty cool stuff that we all learned there. The class I took on power supply, and there was something else in there. I forget what it was. Sorry, but one of my 4 reports. And I would also like to thank the members who enabled me to go to these things, either because I was delegated to go or because I wanted to go, because I wanted to advance my skills. And you'll see, when you look at my expense reports that are now made public, sorry, we forgot, we didn't have those for a bit, that are public, you'll see that I do spend your money, and I think I spend it well. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Kirsten. Any other questions, comments about director report section? I see Holly. Yeah.
All I'm going to mention right now is that CREA is having meetings tomorrow and Friday. So the board packet for those meetings is in this onboard board packet. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please let me know.
Appreciate that.
Holly, is that something else you're having to do from spring break?
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you for your extra effort. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. And thank you all for your extra effort. And by extra effort, I mean an extra 2 hours here today. I won't wrap it up without going back to you, Joe.
Just a reminder that April 12th is Earth Day in Durango, and the staff promises to be putting on quite a show. So I hope everybody can make it.
All right. Tim, what do you got to wrap up?
Yeah, just a reminder that I think there's another coffee with Chris tomorrow. Is that correct? In Ignacio? So been able to have a lot of drinks with Chris lately, a lot of them caffeinated. So that's good stuff. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Also speaking at the Pagosa Rotary Club this week. So
excellent.
Yeah. Good reminder. Thank you for that, Tim. Yeah. And so as we sign off here, I know we were long today. There was a lot of great discussion. I appreciate all your effort and your patience. If there is any direct or constructive criticism about how we got that done today or how I got that done today, feel free to reach out either by email or give me a phone call. Always looking to do the best job we can possibly do running these board meetings. So with that, I'll let you get on with it. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Be safe.